Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Tuesday, January 24th. This is a voting meeting of the Prescott City Council. Do we have any introductions or announcements, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, we do, Mayor. So I have some announcements. This Thursday, Prescott Fire Engineer Jason Hardison seeks to set a Guinness World Record and also bring awareness to mental health in fire service. He will be running blindfolded on a treadmill for 24 hours. His desire is that this event adds to the conversations to normalize the mental health support system available within the fire service. He wants to lower the threshold of seeking help. Jason wants to run blindfolded so that others can see. Jason said, above all, if I manage to bring home a Guinness World Record in the process, I do it for more than myself. I do it for anyone that has been impacted by this mental health epidemic. So I'm not running to break a record, I'm running to break the barriers for us all. All money raised will be given to the Prescott Fire Honor Guard to support their efforts in honoring the flag and honoring those that have fallen. I want to thank Jason for bringing awareness to the subject of mental health in our local fire services, and I wish him all the best in his endeavors, blindfolded or not. Second, in case you haven't noticed, we have had a series of winter storms in Prescott over the past few weeks. I want to shout out to our snowplow crews for keeping our streets safe and passable. Also, special recognition to Brian Scott, who has been providing twice a day updates for Facebook and for the city's website, and also for council, so that we can all stay informed. Thank you for all that you do, Public Works.
All right, we'll now move on to an invocation by Pastor Dan Hurlbert of the Prescott United Methodist Church.
We try to be united, Mr. Mayor, not always.
And then
Good news and bad news. I'm praying at 8 city council meetings this year, so depending on who you are, that's either good news or bad news. So
Well, we appreciate your availability.
let us pray. Gracious God, our provider, we give you thanks for the beauty of this day, for the gushing creeks and the snow in the mountains. We thank you for those who have gone into the storms to clear our roads and made it safe for us to drive to work and leisure. Today we are especially grateful for our city's firefighters. We thank you for their willingness to face danger and injury for our sake, and we pray that you will keep them safe as they serve this, your city. We pray for our servicemen and women, especially those in harm's way. We thank you for all who serve, and we pray for your protection over them. We ask that you would guide the council with your wisdom on this day, that they would make the decisions that you would have them make. Bless us all by your presence in this meeting and in our homes and in our lives. Keep us mindful that all that we have and all that we are come from you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Please,
Now we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mayor Pro Tem Montoya.
please join me in pledging allegiance to our flag and our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Good,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Montoya,
Here.
Councilwoman Cantelmi.
Here.
Councilman Moore,
Here.
Councilmember Rusing.
Here.
Councilman Sischka,
Here.
and Councilman Tenney.
Yes.
All are present.
We're going to make a slight change in the order of the presentations today. We know that there's quite a few people here that want to maybe have a few public comments regarding the SIMPO ongoing projects category. So we're going to move the presentation of the Downwinders by Sherry Hanna up to the first, and then the presentation of the Firefighter of the Year as the second, and then we'll have the SIMPO presentation as the third presentation. So Sherry, you want to come forward and let us know about the Downwinders? And I see that we have a representative from Congressman Eli Crane's office here as well.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Good and council members. My name is Sherry Hanna, and I appreciate the opportunity for you to give me my annual presentation regarding recognizing January 27th as the National Day of Remembrance for American Downwinders. I would like to show a brief video explaining exactly what a downwinder is. As the Cold War intensified between the United States and the Soviet Union escalated at a shocking pace, the need for more information regarding As the Cold War intensified and the arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union escalated at a shocking pace, the need for more information regarding nuclear weapons became apparent. On December 18, 1950, President Harry Truman approved the nuclear proving ground, the Nevada Test Site, which was 65 miles northwest of Las Vegas, Nevada. The barren testing range carved out of the Mojave Desert would be home for the next several decades to 928 of the 1,054 above and below ground nuclear experiments conducted by the United States government. The testing finally ended in September 1992 when a moratorium went into effect. Before the moratorium, mushroom clouds were a familiar sight from the Las Vegas Strip. In 1962, President John F. Kennedy visited the Nevada Test Site. He has been the only sitting president to do so. In 1963, President Kennedy and Soviet President Nikita Khrushchev signed a treaty that required the superpowers to conduct nuclear experiments underground. This historic treaty banned nuclear testing in the air, oceans, or space. The first nuclear experiment in Nevada lit up the desert sky on January 27, 1951. The radioactive fallout blanketed not only the arid desert, but farm fields, homes, schools, factories, and businesses across the region. The wind carried contamination throughout parts of Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. People living in the affected areas were known as downwinders. From 1945 to 1962, the United States government conducted hundreds of nuclear tests which exposed citizens to radiation. Employees in the uranium mining industry were also exposed to toxic levels of radiation. In 1990, Congress passed the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act as an apology to individuals who developed certain cancers and other serious diseases related to nuclear weapons testing and uranium mining. Victims or their surviving family members are awarded amounts from $50,000 to $100,000. Free cancer screenings are available to qualified individuals. Thank you, Tyler. In 2011, the United States Senate voted unanimously to designate January 27th as a National Day of Remembrance for American downwinders who worked and lived downwind from nuclear testing while they were adversely affected by the radiation exposure generated by the above-ground nuclear weapons testing. Since the passing of the Radiation Exposure Act, better known as RECA, in 1990, a recent short-term extension of RECA was passed, extending it to the summer of 2024. In 2021, U.S. Senate Bill S-2798 and House Bill H.R. 5338 were introduced, better known as the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act Amendments of 2021, to include the following amendments to the bill. Extend RECA by 19 years to 2045. Expand the downwinder eligibility areas to Idaho, Montana, Colorado, New Mexico, Guam, and all of Arizona, Nevada, and Utah, which studies show residents during that time frame of the nuclear testing had received high levels of radiation contamination from the nuclear testing. Extending the uranium worker eligibility period to better cover exposed workers, including additional categories of uranium workers. Expanding the number of compensational illnesses. Increasing the amount of compensation to reflect the costs of care, inflation, and allowing successful claimants to receive the difference between their claims and the increased amount of compensation, and providing health care benefits to claimants. In September of 2022, as an Arizona downwinder advocate, I was honored to be invited by the Union of concerned scientists to Washington, D.C. to give my testimony to Congress and Senate members, as well along with other downwinder advocates from around the Southwest in support of the bill. This bill has broad bipartisan support with a total of 77 co-sponsors in the House and 24 in the Senate. Unfortunately, since we were not able to gain majority support for the bill in the House and the Senate before the end of 2022, we will need to start from scratch again this year with this Congress to rebuild those numbers. Fortunately, it is much easier to get a congressperson or a senator to co-sponsor the bill the second time around than it was the first time. We will need 218 co-sponsors in the House and 60 in the Senate to move the bill to the floor for a vote. RECA is a valuable program, and its enactment was a huge step towards justice for those harmed. Since January of 2021, RECA has paid out $2.4 billion to 37,457 claimants. Our work is not over, and I will continue to work with legislators, both locally and nationally, to work towards the goal of the new bill's passage and seek justice for the downwinders. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Jeff Timm, who's here representing Congressman Eli Crane. We'll read a letter of support in recognition of the National Day of American Downwinder.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. On behalf of Eli Crane, by the way, I'm Jeff Timm. As she said, I'm the Director of Military and Veteran Services for Eli Crane. And I'd like to read this letter that Eli penned. Dear Mayor Good and Prescott City Council, one of the great legacies of our nation is the ability to work together to secure our sovereignty and way of life. While the rewards have been great, they have not been without casualty. Few know this better than those affected by the effects of downwinding. Downwinders, our very own Arizona citizens, have been profoundly affected by the late atmospheric weapons tests of the mid-20th century. These effects have included unique susceptibility to various maladies, including over a dozen forms of aggressive cancer. While we are grateful for the deterrence against foreign malice these weapons have provided, the cost to Arizonans cannot be ignored. I firmly believe that when our government, wisely formed to serve the interests of its populace, acts in a way which places its citizens in harm's way, it should do all in its power to remedy those grievances. While we cannot undo the past, I hope to be an effective representative of the victims of this tragedy in helping to bring some semblance of justice to those affected and assurance that all precautions will be taken moving forward to prevent its repetition. This opportunity to reflect on the sacrifices our great state continues to make for our nation's security is not lost on me. I am honored to have my letter read before you today and look forward to the opportunity to learn more about this vital issue in the days ahead. Sincerely, Elijah Crane, Member of Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you.
And please give our regards to our congressman.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Afternoon,
Council,
Chief.
Holder Fire Chief. Today I'm here to do two things I normally don't do. Number one, I'm wearing a tie and I'm not asking for money. Number two, I'm going to actually read something from a script. But first, I'd like to have Brandon Scott and his family join me up here. While they get up here, I've said this many times to you individually and collectively, and Mayor Pro Tem's comments were an indication just how proud I am of our fire department. All of the members of our fire department are this exemplary, but today we had the opportunity to honor one of our firefighters, and I'll, in just a second, read the nomination. All right. So, technology, right? This is one of the reasons why I'm extemporaneous. I don't rely on my technology that much. All right, so Brandon takes pride in his job, department, and fellow employees. Brandon has paid from his own pocket to attend out-of-state training to bring skills and knowledge back to our department. He has helped several firefighters during their probationary year, ran several of them through basically skills evolutions in the pouring rain, gave us tips, and did this all on his own time because he wanted to see people in the department do well. Brandon has taken it upon himself to help others, including firefighter spouses, achieve physical fitness goals by assisting anyone who wanted help with lifting competitions and events, and just meeting previously unattainable goals. You can probably judge from the gentleman standing behind me why that might be the case. He is a subject matter expert. Brandon takes pride in his job, department, and fellow employees. He is always working to improve the EMS program and has a full box of alternative EMS tools and will orient others so that they can familiarize themselves with this equipment. He keeps our stations stocked with supplies and will go the extra mile to make sure everyone has what they need when they need it. Brandon also likes to be in action, preferring to serve his time at one of the two busiest downtown stations, Station 72. In addition, Brandon has been a regular at the Yavapai Food Bank's food drive that takes place bi-yearly in front of Walmart. When he sees something that needs to be supported or improved, he makes it a priority to help. He gives everyone 100% and really has a passion to see others do well. Brandon also, thankfully for me personally, participated in the Dancing for the Stars fundraiser as a backup dancer that helped raise over $400,000 for youth in Yavapai County. With that, I want to congratulate Brandon Scott for being the 2022 Firefighter of the Year. And one thing I will also say is you can't underestimate the fact that he helped us with medical supplies during a pandemic. So this is something that a lot of our firefighters do. They're basically Swiss Army knives. They don't just fight fire. And this is one great example, and I'm extremely proud to honor Brandon with this award.
All right, next, which apparently is the presentation you've all been waiting for. We'll have a presentation by Vinny Gallegos, the Executive Director of SIMPO, regarding ongoing projects.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Good to be with you today. Vincent Gallegos. I go by Vinny. I'm the Executive Director of the Central Yavapai Metropolitan Planning Organization, or SIMPO for short. And we might have a few things going on, so we wanted to give you our annual update. So just a reminder, if some people here are not familiar with SIMPO, the vision is to promote and maintain a regional coordinated transportation system for the safe and efficient movement of people, goods, and services. Our mission is to use regional leadership in planning and promoting a comprehensive multimodal transportation system. Just for our annual update, I just put in bold a few words that are very key into what we do. In that vision, again, it is a regional effort that we do. And then in our mission, we are a planning organization that exercises leadership. Next slide is just a little bit of trivia to kind of put some references as to our existence. So the MPO is, they exist throughout the United States, metropolitan planning organizations. There's 8 in Arizona and there's 420 in the United States. They're federally mandated and they come into existence with the U.S. Census. Anytime the census designates an area with a population of 50,000 or greater, an MPO is established by the governor of Arizona. SIMPO was established in 2003, so this is our 20th anniversary, our 20th birthday, not quite old enough to drink, but maybe after today, SIMPO might have a drink. We'll see what happens. We operate with an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Prescott, the town of Prescott Valley, town of Chino Valley, town of Dewey Humboldt, and Yavapai County. I serve at the pleasure of an executive board with our mayor on that executive board serving as the secretary treasurer. The board that I answer to, you can see the list here. This year, our chairman is Yavapai County Supervisor Craig Brown. The vice chair is the mayor of Dewey Humboldt, John Hughes. Mayor Palguda was the most recent chair. He's the mayor of Prescott Valley. And then we also have Councilman Tom Armstrong from the town of Chino Valley, and Gary Knights, the State Transportation Board member. I won't read this list to you, but I do want to highlight your representation on our technical committee is your city engineer, Ian Mattingly, and you can see the other staff participation. So again, through our intergovernmental agreement, we work directly with your staff in all that we do, and again, take those recommendations on to the executive board. I only have 2 more slides, and then I'll turn it over to another voice that you can listen to today. So I just wanted to talk for a moment about SIMPO's efforts with our state legislature. We were successful in advocating and exercising our leadership to bring about $10.8 million of one-time funding of transportation into the SIMPO region. I won't talk about all the projects except one. I want to highlight again Mayor Good's efforts on behalf of the region, on behalf of SIMPO, adjacent to the airport, a project that is important if you're familiar with the intersection of State Route 89 and 89A. If you're going eastbound, there's 2 lanes, but if you stay on that right lane, you just stay on the frontage road. The effort of this project will add an additional lane onto the highway. So SIMPO has done the planning for that. It's about a $5.5 million project. We were successful in working with Senator Fan, Representative Wynn, and Representative Burgess last year in receiving about $3 million for that project. With that said, we're going to be asking for $28.3 million this year of our state legislature. SIMPO has identified 2 projects, and you can see them listed on here. It's the widening of Glassford Hill, and it's the widening of State Route 89 in the town of Chino Valley. So why this is important is this is on behalf of the region. We've evaluated priority projects throughout the whole area, and if we have the opportunity again next year, it's very likely that Prescott may have a project identified as a number 1 project on there. So on behalf of the region, even though some of these projects aren't within your boundary, they help to have the transportation network operate efficiently and effectively. So I'm here to please ask for your support in these projects, and I look for the regional support if Prescott is in that rotation next year. My last slide is we've just been successful in working with Senator Kelly in his office to receive $480,000 for the design concept report of State Route 89A between 89 and Glassford Hill. What this will do is it will establish the foundation for the widening from 4 lanes to 6 lanes. We realize the growth around the airport, the growth in Prescott and Prescott Valley is really needed for that area. So with that said, I have 2 of my staff planners here with us. One will be very familiar to you in just a few minutes, but before her, we're going to turn it over to Lindsay Post and give an update on some of the projects she's working on, and then I'll come back up and answer questions for you.
Thank you, Vinny. My name is Lindsay Post. I don't believe I've been in front of this body before, so thank you for having me, and thank you for your service to the city and for your partnership with SIMPO. I am a SIMPO planner, and I am the project manager of the State Route 69 Urbanized Master Corridor Plan. Quite a mouthful. We usually just call it the SR 69 plan. As we all know, this is a 15-mile corridor from Prescott to Dewey Humboldt. About 6 miles of that is within the city of Prescott. We know this is a very busy route, 45,000 vehicles a day, and that's the latest count available through the traffic monitoring systems in our state. And so that latest data came from the year 2021. We have 5 years of crash data available to us, and this is reported from all enforcement agencies. I gathered the data from the stretch of SR 69 that is within Prescott and the Prescott Yavapai tribe. So you'll see there that 476 reported crashes occurred in that 5 years on SR 69. The Urbanized Master Corridor Plan is intended to find us implementable solutions in a prioritized list of segments of our corridor that need to be replaced or widened or rehabbed. And the point of the plan is to help us recommend what those solutions should be. We do want to highlight, of course, what we've all been seeing as we drive on SR 69, that widening in front of Lowe's. That you see the map corresponds to that final bullet point there. We want to point out through constant effort, it still has taken us 10 years, $13 million to get that 1 mile of corridor addressed. And so behind the scenes, that of course included a lot of SIMPO's work as the planning agency for our region. I'm also the project manager of the Sundog Connector Design Concept Report and Environmental Overview. We call it the DCR. As we've all seen as residents and visitors of this area, the Sundog Connector is not a new idea. It's been in our area since at least 1998 with the Prescott East Area Plan. And of course, as we've been driving through our Quad City areas, we've of course seen those terminus points that have already been constructed, which shows a certain amount of initiative, at least by the city of Prescott and Prescott Valley, and town of Prescott Valley. SIMPO's work is to conduct plans and feasibility studies toward this end. Our job is to evaluate the network overall. The keyword you see there, resiliency, has to do with our transportation network. The U.S. Census has designated our area as transportation disadvantaged, which means that there's not a lot of options if there's a major geological event, for example, or if there's an accident on that small stretch of SR 69, for example. We all know how long we have to wait if we're not lucky enough to be sort of behind the Yavapai connector, for example. So resiliency also has to do with what happens when folks no longer have the ability to drive. Our area does not have a lot of options as far as alternatives for modes of transportation. And so that's what resiliency means in that context. We do want to point out that this is a 3.5-mile potential corridor, about half of which is reflected in the development agreements with Yavapai Hills and Storm Ranch. We know that through approved plats, at least there are 2,000 units remaining that have not yet been initiated as in construction, which is something we at SIMPO are studying as part of this effort. So the DCR is an 18-month project. We are about halfway through. We still have about 9 months to go. And in those 9 months, the first 9 months, we're gathering and evaluating the data. And now it's applying and developing the 2 alternatives that we are going to present to our partners and the public. What we want to make sure folks know is also about that open space IGA. As you know, the intent is to pursue purchasing of state land trust to preserve for open space, and that is within the study area of the Sundog Connector DCR. Besides very highly visible projects, we at SIMPO also do a lot of work in the background to support our partners. So with the help of a consultant group, we worked with your staff, as Vinny mentioned in previous slides, in our technical advisory committee and beyond, to help you identify these 3 projects and pursue funding for them. So SIMPO spent about $20,000 of our funds toward this effort, and in return we got about $3.2 million in projects for our region. I've highlighted the one that is pertinent to your to the city of Prescott, and what's very exciting here is it is 100% funded. No local matches needed for that project. And so that is the HSIP Highway Safety Improvement Program. And then, of course, our responsibility in the region is to maintain and update every 5 years the Regional Transportation Plan. This is a 25-year look into the future, and it evaluates current conditions and provides an outlook for short-term, medium-term, and long-term, and makes recommendations for solutions to any issues we have in our transportation network. This is, of course, we work with your general plan to make sure that it rolls up into our regional transportation plan, so we follow closely with what you are doing. We want to point out there in that top left corner, the highest crash rates in the last regional transportation plan 2045. As you can see, the top 4 of the top 5 are within the city of Prescott. And so this is just some of the information that the regional transportation plan provides for you. You'll see there also a safety analysis, but beyond that, we also work on a regional safety plan that's also updated every 2 years or so. I'm going to let my colleague Bryn speak to that in the next slide. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Bryn Stotler. I'm a planner with SIMPO. It's great to be in front of you all again here in a familiar spot. Lindsay referred to our regional transportation plan, and another of our plans that is routinely updated is our regional safety plan. It is about every 5 years that we update this plan, and we are currently in that process right now. The regional safety plan becomes basically a 5-year picture and a compilation of very critical data that is provided to all of our member agencies. And then it becomes the backdrop for each jurisdiction's critical traffic planning. So as you have heard from some of the other mentioned on other slides today, some of the safety analysis is derived from this particular safety plan. The plan that we're currently working on is a 5-year picture between 2017 and to 2021. That's the complete data that's available now to finish out this safety plan. You can see that I've highlighted the Prescott line, and I just want to point out that the 8,256 incidents in the grand total number for SIMPO indicates just the planning boundary. So SIMPO's planning area is about 400 square miles, represents about 5% of the county in total. So we do want to be clear that we're just talking about SIMPO's 400 square miles here. Prescott does have a significant piece of the crash data here, about 3,456 crashes out of the 8,256 total. I'm going to go to the next slide and we'll break down some of these numbers into percentages, but you can see that the criteria that are used for a master safety study start with the very big metrics: fatalities, serious injury accidents, minor injury crashes, those crashes where injuries may have happened but weren't confirmed at the time, or no injury accidents. So then to break this down a little bit further, and not to get too numeric here, but the percentage of total crashes in the SIMPO area that were originated in Prescott is about 42%. Percentage of total fatalities, and the parentheses represent the first number being Prescott's share of the total. So that second bullet, total fatalities, Prescott had 19 of the 56 fatalities for the last safety study. That represents about 33.9%. Total serious injury crashes, similar, 98 were found originated in the city of Prescott out of the total 265. There is some better news, though. The percentage of crashes in Prescott, of Prescott's total crashes with no injuries at all, were about 71.3%. So that is some good news. ADOT establishes a statewide goal, and we adopt that goal as a part of our planning activities. And that goal is to reach 0 fatalities in the state of Arizona. SIMPO is always involved in initiatives that are helping to reduce that number. Something that we'd like to introduce to the City of Prescott residents, and we've been talking about this plan for a couple of months now. I've actually been in front of the City of Prescott PB-TAC, which is the Pedestrian Bicycle Technical Advisory Committee, talking about the active transportation plan. This is the first of its kind in the region. This has not been studied before as a regional planning exercise. We've done a little branding with this plan, and we're calling it the ACT UP. That stands for Active Community Transportation Unified Plan. So you may be hearing about the ACT UP as the planning process ensues. We're just in the procurement process now, getting ready to post an RFP and get a consultant chosen. We hope to kick off this plan by early May and at the latest, the beginning of summer. We like to coordinate and align this type of planning with community activities that are also in line with it, such as the Whiskey Off-Road Mountain Bike Race, such as the Prescott Valley Bike Rodeo. There are a number of community activities that align very well with this type of initiative and where we can get a lot of voices in the community on board. It's important to remember that our region isn't one size fits all. The plan will be a regional plan, but each jurisdiction will be highlighted and have its own subsection. So each jurisdiction within our SIMPO agency will have a inventory of existing facilities. And when we say facilities, what we mean is crosswalks, midpoint crosswalks, bicycle lanes, those types of facilities, facilities that support this type of transportation. It's primarily focused on bicycle and pedestrian, but because we are a blend of rural and urban communities, we will be looking at some equestrian options, and we will also be making, we will be looking to connect the bicycle and pedestrian built environment with transit options. Schools are also a critical subcomponent of this plan. We have been meeting with school superintendents. In fact, we will be meeting with a school superintendent or assistant superintendent that we know very well soon. And the schools are a sub-focus because for those students that can walk or bike to school, we really want to know that we have done everything in the built environment to ensure the safety of students. So that always becomes a critical sub-focus of an active transportation plan. Let's talk about public transportation for a moment. This van may be recognizable to some of you. If you've been out and about in Prescott Valley at all, you'll know that the town of Prescott Valley actually recently launched a microtransit system called Yavaline, the YAV. That's their informal slogan. The launch of this system was based on SIMPO's Central Yavapai Phase Transit Plan, which was completed in 2020. The system is fully funded without local match by CARES Act funding. So this was an additional source of funding that was available to the region, and the town of Prescott Valley opted to go ahead and take that funding, become the designated recipient, and launch this microtransit system. Yavaline officially launched in September of '22 for year one of its 4-year implementation plan. The plan that was reviewed and accepted by the SIMPO board includes expansion to Prescott in year 2. And all of that implementation is funded under that initial CARES Act funding of $3.6 million that the town of Prescott Valley accepted in January of '21. We've been reviewing demographics and early data on the ridership of this system, and the data is very strong. Pedro Rodriguez is the Transit Development Coordinator for the town of Prescott Valley. He indicates that ridership is basically at capacity of their 3 vans already. They are looking at the purposes of rides also, and it is very encouraging to know that a full 30% of rides are to and from employment. So people are really using this system for purposeful rides. This is a demand response system. That means that you either pick up a phone, call an 800 number to book a ride, or you use an app. This does not have a fixed route service at this time. So it's transit that looks a little bit different, and it's less overt in the driving environment. You're just seeing a van, but there are maybe 12 passengers on that van that are all going to different places. And they're doing it without a vehicle. And they're not doing it with another vehicle on Highway 69. There's an upside to all of this. A note about transit in the region more universally. As a part of SIMPO's apportionments from the federal government, and what that means is tax dollars that we've all paid to the federal government that come back to us through these initiatives, $1.7 million is available to the region every year. Since 2003, we have never accepted the funding. And that is just because transit has been an evolving conversation, It's grown and looks different today than it did when SIMPO first became an agency. And perhaps in this version, transit is a conversation that we should be enlarging. When we have traffic issues on our major highways in and out of the area, we need to start looking at other alternatives. What is the catch on those funds? And one of the main reasons that they have been returned, they are limited to public transportation. So if there isn't will for public transportation, those monies are returned to the state and become part of a competitive pool. And I hesitate to highlight this, but when we return those funds, they've done things for other areas of Arizona, like build bus barns in Flagstaff and complete the transit system in the Yuma area where they did compete and gain those funds. So I think the point being that your tax dollars are offered to come back to the region for public transportation. They can be working here on those initiatives, and they can support other important initiatives such as lowering traffic. With that, I'm going to point out that we have a new SIMPO quarterly newsletter. We have provided, I think, a stash of those to the city clerk, or will if we haven't yet. We brought a number of copies. We are sending this also out in mostly electronic form, but we're very proud of it, and we hope that you all check it out. And with that, I'll invite Vinny back up here for questions and answers.
Mr. Mayor, council, happy to address any questions and comments you have.
Councilman Tenney.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the great presentations, all three of you. Good information for us as we make decisions going forward. I just want to clarify something that Bryn mentioned just now. So our annual apportionment that's been available to us of federal tax dollars coming back to us for public transportation has been $1.7 million per year
Since 2000.
for the last 20 years. So we've left $34 million of our tax money on the table. Is that essentially correct?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Tenney, and if I can answer on behalf of Bryn, the short answer is yes. The calculation is going to be slightly off because the numbers have changed over the years. It was sitting at 1.2 million for almost 10 years. It's just this recent last 2 years that it bumped up to 1.7, but your final total is ballpark fairly close.
That's a relief it wasn't 34 million, it's only like 30 million.
Yeah, give or take $1 million, but yes, our tax dollars have been returned to those other communities.
Good clarification. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Rusing.
Thank you. Hello, Vinny. I have a few questions concerning the Sundog connector, involving the variables involved when you are doing your planning. One of the variables that I'm concerned about is sales tax revenue, because that Sundog connector will bypass a very important commercial corridor, Highway 69. And a very important part of it will be bypassed. And according to our finance director, that corridor generates 30% of our sales tax revenue. And in comparison, for example, the downtown only generates 10% of our sales tax. So I was wondering if that variable was taken into consideration when you do your planning, because as the traffic flows from where the jail intersection is east, it looks like most of the traffic will bypass our commercial corridor and be directed right into Prescott Valley's shopping area on the east side. And then, as you know, it will cut across Glassford Hill, and we are trying to work with the state and have a regional state park there on Glassford Hill. And it looks like this corridor will dissect through the hill with a lot of mass grading to put in this road, which I understand. Do you know how many lanes is planned for the road?
Mr. Mayor and Councilman Rusing, if I can go back to the last question or comment, just to let you know, when we are talking about the regional transportation plan and the Sundog Connector, what we use is traffic modeling. So we take in all the information that you provide to us as a council and staff with your general plan, with your development agreements. This is for the entire region. So we plug all of that information as it exists today and as it's projected to the future. And what we do with that modeling is, again, where is the traffic today and where could it be in the future as Highway 69 is congested? What happens there? What happens with other development throughout the region? So we do take that into account. And again, we allow the computer to generate. With that said, we don't just trust the computer only. We allow your staff to look that over, to vet that, and to carefully monitor that and be able to raise any red flags that, something just isn't making sense with that. So that's one thing. And then on to your second point, and now remind me, I just lost my train of thought.
The regional park, the effect on the regional park, because ecotourism is a main economic driver for Arizona and especially for the Prescott area.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Councilwoman Rusing. So on that part, as part of our planning, we're going to bring forward 3 possible alternatives. One is considered a no-build alternative. If you don't build it from Prescott Lakes Parkway all the way to Prescott Valley, what does that look like for the future? And then the other 2 alternatives are within that. Now, with that said, part of your question and comment goes into how many lanes? Is there lighting along the roadway? Is it 2 lanes? Is it 4 lanes? Is the speed limit 25, 35, 45? Is there access provided to the possible park, maybe a trailhead? Is it multimodal? So all of those things will be outlined in the final study as part of a recommendation, allowing you as decision makers to make the decision. Ultimately, we'll have expert recommendations, but you'll receive that and say, due to financial limitations or to public will, you make certain choices based on that. But we're going to provide you all the information that we can to make an educated vote on this project.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and I want to express our appreciation for the hard work involved in getting the other 3 projects going. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Councilman.
Councilwoman Cantelmi.
Thank you very much. I thank you, Vinny. Thank you, ladies. You guys did a great presentation. I happened to see you at the County Board of Supervisors meeting. It was really good then, impactful, especially the 3,000 accidents. that really, it was actually closer to 4. Anyway, thanks for that. I do have a question on the money, the $1.7 million. Would it be possible, has anybody ever explored, a regional effort between Prescott Valley and using that money for the expansion of the Yava line? Can it be shared that way? I'm just curious.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilman Cantelmi. Absolutely. So again, a planning organization, we have a whiteboard and we're always putting ideas on it. Some make it to the light and some don't, but we've explored it. And there are possibilities. There's lots of possibilities with it. What I will say to date is, we've looked at opportunities of public-private partnership. We've looked at being able to use the monies in a variety of different ways. One thing I would highlight to your point, SIMPO was successful last year in getting a law changed. And what the law was allowing a transit organization to be formed in Yavapai County like they have in Flagstaff and Yuma. And the reason for that law change was allowing us that would formally allow Prescott Valley transit agencies like Yavapai Regional Transit in Chino, Prescott Valley Transit to be able to formally work together. And when you can do that, then you could leverage dollars better together and make it all work. So hope that addresses your idea and question.
I will follow up on that. Has that happened? Has anybody facilitated that sort of situation with those talks?
I would say, Councilman, we've been trying to facilitate it for the last 20 years. We really have. There's just a lot of barriers in that. And it's what we're all familiar with in organizations. There's, at times, silos. There's interest in legitimately so, trying to keep the doors open, focused on that. And sometimes the hardest part is just coming together, working together in coordination. But we've tried. We welcome you and others to the table, to that conversation, because we do think there's opportunities in this area to work together on that.
Well, maybe that'll happen now that we have this massive amount of people living here now in our growth. I hope it does happen. And thanks again for your work. Appreciate it. Thanks for those answers.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Councilman Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Vinny and ladies, for the presentation. Wonderful job. One question I think that I have, and has certainly been kicked around in community meetings and discussions with constituents, is whether you're putting resources into studying the feasibility of doing the Sundog Connector Road, but have we done any studies to formalize finishing widening Highway 69 from the intersection of 169 and 69, so Dewey-Humboldt area, that major intersection, all the way to the 69-89 interchange in Prescott? Because right now we go 2, 3, 2, 3 repeatedly, and it would seem that the traffic would flow a lot better, and maybe that would be a measure that we could focus on before focusing on the Sundog Connector Road, is to finish getting Highway 69 to 3 lanes from 169 to 89.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Moore, we would welcome you to our staff if you have time for another job. That's a great idea. Now, I hate to steal your thunder. That's exactly what Lindsay highlighted on one of her slides. We are going to be doing what is called the Master Corridor Plan of State Route 69. It'll go from the intersection of 89 and 69 in Prescott to 169, 69 in Dewey-Humboldt or Prescott Valley. Its specific purpose is to give us a blueprint moving forward. What of those things that you talked about, the 2-lane, 3-lane, 2-lane, what is the number one problem area? Obviously, the whole thing needs help, but we need to prioritize. Lindsay shared with you all earlier, and Mayor Good, we both know this, and we shrug our shoulders so often about ADOT, but again, 10 years to widen 1 mile of road. $13 million. And I say that not to put a wet blanket on the conversation, but it's reality. That is one of the very few projects in greater Arizona outside Phoenix and Tucson that ADOT is supporting for expansion. So I don't disagree that, well, let me say this, our priority has been 69, is 69, and will continue to be 69. The plan is going to give us the blueprint as to how we take the bites out of the elephant. Where do we focus on first? And it's all going to be 69. It's just a matter of what is the order of that. So great idea. We're going to be kicking it off here in the next month. It'll take us the rest of the year to get it. What we hope to deliver to you is the results of that plan and the results of Sundog Connector, so you can express your voices as council where the ultimate priority is.
Thank you, Vinny.
You're welcome.
All right, normally, you have Council Member Rusing.
I just wanted to mention a little history. I remember the 69, original Highway 69, when it was referred to as Blood Alley. And I just wanted to thank you for all the effort, because it is public safety is job number one. And I remember John Olson, Supervisor John Olson, that was one of his missions, was to get that highway widened. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman.
And I will say that our current state representative, Quan Nguyen, has been advocating and been quite successful in getting transportation dollars assigned to some of those segments of Highway 69, and I know he's going to continue with that. And now that he has a seatmate with Selena Bliss and our new state senator Ken Bennett, I think they're all going to help work with the transportation committees to try to get more of that corridor funded and built. All right, normally we don't take public comment after a presentation, but it doesn't really work to have public comment come into the call to the public, because that's only for items that aren't agendized. So I am going to entertain public comment on this this topic, this agendized presentation. But I will ask that the people that want to make a comment keep their comments to 3 minutes and keep it focused on the presentation topics and not be overlapping or repetitive. So how many public comments have you received, Sarah?
I have 7, Mayor.
All right, let's proceed.
Rich Kaplan.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I want to talk about Sundog. I'm here on behalf of Yavapai Hills. I'm part of the Yavapai Hills Sundog Committee that the Board of Directors for Yavapai Hills is authorized to oppose Sundog. I have a couple of things that I think need to be clarified so that the record regarding what SIMPO is doing with Sundog is clear, and perhaps it needs to be corrected. I've watched the presentations here. I've watched the presentations in the town of Prescott Valley. I've watched the SIMPO presentations at Yavapai County. I'm just going to run through these. First of all, in Lindsay Post's slide, she mentioned the Prescott East Area Plan. And we've heard this on the radio and in other places. There's an argument being made that the general plan and the development agreements that were signed many years ago all basically lay in place and set in stone this Sundog connector. I don't believe that's true. First of all, in the Storm Ranch Development Agreement, which is a series of agreements, and I've read those, the first agreement which the city negotiated was dated July 10, 2007, and this may be for the city council. It specifically said in that agreement that PEAP, the Prescott Area East Area Plan, is not incorporated into the city's plan, and I think that was a part of that agreement, and that was a representation being made that the PEAP plan maybe isn't the status quo. The second point with the Yavapai Hills Development Agreement, it refers to a JHK traffic study. There's been amendments to that development agreement. I've never been able to find that JHK traffic study, and the significance of that is that the development agreement calls for some proportionate cost sharing between the developer and Yavapai Hills. And I think it's an indicator if that traffic study was never done, that maybe there's a lot of facts that need to be fixed, and the argument that this has already been decided 25 years ago is misplaced. And that traffic study is supposed to lay out the formula or be used to set a formula for who pays for what. But there are two overriding questions I think you need to ask the city attorney. Do these development agreements require the city to build Sundog, or do they just include some provisions about if the city decides to do that, some of the things might be laid out, but there's a lot of work to be done? And does it require the developer to build Sundog? And I think the answer is no, which brings me to the Storm Ranch Development Agreement. The latest agreement was done a few years ago, and that basically says on page 1 that it supersedes and makes disappear all the prior agreements, of which there were many. That agreement says it only calls for only 2 lanes of road confined to the Storm Ranch subdevelopment, and basically makes clear that any other expansion, say to a 4-lane highway, is to be at the sole expense of the city. So I think people need to understand that this is not a free ride.
Please conclude your comments, Rich.
Okay. So I would also point out that on December 9th, 1997, I've been looking at minutes. A memo was written by the city manager to the mayor and the city council, and there was reference there to the Klein connector, which I believe is now the preamble for the Sundog connector. And it made clear that there was a lot of negotiating going on back then, but it said that the Storm family considerations had a lot to do with where the Klein connector was being proposed. And a lot of history has changed, so I would suggest
You're exceeding your
that-
time.
All right.
Please conclude.
I'll save it for another time, but I think you need to review the development agreements because the record is being seriously misstated.
Thank you, Rich.
Robert Forte.
I don't think they heard you.
Robert Forte.
Public speaking is not my forte.
Be a lot quicker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, fellow council members. My name is Robert Forte. I'm a Yavapai Hills homeowner. I'm also a retired law enforcement. Love this beautiful city of Prescott. So I'll just get to the point real quick because I don't want to be repetitious, and I'm probably going to say things you're going to hear again. So let me just say, I stand in opposition to this sundock. I think the other things that SIMPO is doing sound pretty good, the improvements on Highway 69. But the sundock should be a no-go. First of all, as one of the council people pointed out, it's going to bypass a lot of tax money, the car dealerships. It's not good for the city. It's not good for our tax base. Plus, they're building this right through a community area, right near a community of a lot of retired people. There's a lot of pollutions there. There's noise. The vast majority of people there are against it. We know that because we did a survey of it. The expense of this is unreasonable. It's way out of, even though a lot of this is federal money, this is money that either comes from taxpayers or it comes from printing money because we simply don't have it. Let's face it, that's why we have inflation. This thing is way too expensive. It's not going to help this much. Highway 69 will be a better idea to concentrate there. But anyway, I'll just keep it brief because I'll just leave it basically at that. I think the idea of a park there, a regional park, it sounds like a great idea. Homeowners in Yavapai Hills, I believe, again, I don't know this for a fact, but I believe a lot of them, maybe most of them would probably be more inclined for that. I just want to say, look, I'm not saying this is a threat, but keep in mind, we're a pretty large voting block in Yavapai Hills. This is a big issue to us. So I hope that we can get a lot of support from the council here. And that's all I'm going to say because there's a lot of people that want to talk. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Gary Anderson.
Mayor, Council, Gary Anderson. I reside in Yavapai Hills, 845 Flying U Court. I served on their board of directors for 2 years, and I chaired and still chair the Sundog Subcommittee. We did a survey last July of 1,196 owners, if you will, in Yavapai Hills. Received 482 responses, which is a 40.3% response rate. Of our responses, a majority are opposed to Sundog being built. The biggest concern is creating 2 more Rosser streets. We already have Rosser, as you guys know, having a very busy business street. It's turned into going through a residential area. I'd encourage each of you, and Vinny and staff as well, if you have not driven up Sunrise to the top, up to the summit, near where this road would connect to Sundog if it were built, drive up there, look around, turn around, and then drive back down Sunrise and see what it's like. If you haven't been on that street, there's a lot of blind curves, hills, especially at night. And at the bottom near our clubhouse, it narrows. It gets very narrow, and it's going to be, there's going to be fatalities there with a greater increase of traffic. It's much more probable that that's going to happen. Anyway, just a couple more things. There was a September 7th SIMPO open house, which we attended. They did a wonderful job, opened it up. We were able to participate. Vinny, they had a slide that was there. He just mentioned traffic modeling, which I thought was interesting. One of their slides showed that basically 7% of the traffic on SR 69 will be diverted to Sundog if it's built. 7. So 93 out of 100 vehicles will still continue up and down, but 7 will use this. And again, he doesn't want to name the 4-lane road, but if you look at the previous studies that were done, it's all a 4-lane highway. The drawings on the previous deal show at least a 100-foot minimum. You need 4 lanes and a center divider. Now, again, if you want to do some driving, come up above Hobby Lobby and take a look at the hill there. How much hill are they going to have to grade to go in to get to 4 lanes wide with a center divider? And then to come across Klein Mesa, you've got to come back down. The amount of cost, this $13 million to build a mile, which is a very easy build over here by Lowe's. Wait till you try to build this Sundog. And Vinny, again, you should own up to that it's a 4-lane project. It's identified on SIMPO's information as 4-lane. So we need another highway over there like a hole in the head. It makes no sense economically. Finally, huge and growing voting bloc opposed to this being built in our community. Voters like me are anxious to hear from all of you council people and those that are running what your view is on it before the election next November. Thank you. Thanks so much.
James Howell.
Good afternoon, or it's almost good evening, Mayor Good and council members. My name is Jim Howell. My wife and I own a home at 1198 Sunrise Boulevard in Yavapai Hills. I imagine you connected the dots on that. I am not going to go through this page because you've heard it all in the preceding few minutes, but let me summarize by saying during my working career, I was a public works director. I handled millions of dollars worth of projects. And when I hear that this project has been on the side for 25 years, it's not a good project. You keep pouring money into studies, feasibility studies. What you want is a project that's a no-brainer. That's what I like. Projects that have everything going for them. And improving Highway 69 is the ticket. I think more effort needs to be placed there. And I'll tell you what else I do support is having a regional park on this beautiful property. 2 weeks ago, I walked out into the area that would be scarred, and there was a herd of antelope out there. It's breathtaking. And then lastly, kind of a quasi question, you talked about sales tax. You have TOT, transit occupancy tax. All your hotels are in the same area. Are they included in that number? Because that's a big hit if you start moving the traffic away from the hotels. So anyway, and I'll just say it again, I ask that you remove this project from if it's on your CIP, on your master plans, take it off and quit kicking the can down the road. Thank you for your time.
Roy Smith.
Mayor and council member, my name is Roy Smith. I'm a citizen of Prescott, 19 years here, and today I'm reflecting the views of the Save the Dells organization. Road building has long been the knee-jerk reaction to traffic congestion problems, with little consideration of the serious environmental and social damage, typically favored by the development community and some politicians. There is now increasing public awareness and grave concern and growing opposition to the proposed new four-lane divided highway known as the Sundog Connector. It would make its way along the pristine, wild, and geologically significant southwest shoulder of Glassford Hill, connecting Prescott Lakes Parkway to Prescott Highway State Route 69. You know all this. Its alleged purpose is to relieve traffic congestion on Highway 69 without consideration of a less costly alternative by first completing a more practical solution of widening the existing highway. Planners of the proposed Sundog Connector acknowledged in their 2013 report, where are we? Without considering the less costly alternative by first completing a more practical solution of widening the highway, the existing highway. Planners of the proposed Sundog Connector acknowledge in their 2013 study report that responses from the public suggested a strong support for
Please speak into the microphone, sir.
no build alternative. That was the public's, or that was the Simcoe's report. We ask, why is this costly, unneeded project still moving forward in the face of past and current public opposition? The Sundog Connector would create a host of issues that are of great concern to the local communities. A comprehensive 2013 study recommended that one criterion for a new road will be a population increase of 232,000, that State Route 69 first be widened, and that traffic studies and other improvements should be made before considering the Sundog Connector. It should be noted that none of these benchmarks have been met. Period. What's the rush? On a more serious economic
Mr.
note,
Smith, please
the Sundog
conclude.
Connector would bypass
Please
the wall.
conclude your comments.
Okay. A significant consequence of the Sundog Connector is that it would give vehicular access to developers and the potential for up to 4,000 new homes, adding an additional drain to our overused, fast-depleting little aquifer. Save the Dells organization invites you to listen to the voice of the community, offering alternatives and well-researched arguments against building the 4-lane Sundog Connector. We want you to understand that this community is making its voice heard today. Please take note. This is no place for a road. Thank you.
Scott Gorman.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council people. I had 2 sheets, now I have 1 sheet, and now I only have 1 item because everybody else talked about it. Couple things. One is we were invited to go to the SIMPO presentation over at the Aspire complex. And we had a lot of opposition. And on the radio shows and on some of the documents, we don't see or hear any of that opposition being proposed or being talked about. That's number one. The other thing is, if we expand 69, what happens to the animal migration? I live in Yavapai Hills. Before they put in the big touch mark, we used to have 5 deer a day in our backyard, in the doorways, all over the place. Now, if you see 5 in a month, you're lucky. I'm an outdoor person. I do a lot of riding my bicycle, a lot of hiking. You go down Peavine Trail to the very end of Glassford Hill, that used to be antelope galore. After they put all those homes in, you're lucky if you see them. So is there any plan to build a bridge across? Is there any way to help the migration? Because on mule deer, they tell their young year after year, decade after decade, this is the way we go. They cut that off. They're lost for a while. So that's why we're not seeing any more deer. They're there, but they're not as abundant as they were. And as far as the tax base, everybody pointed these things out. So my presentation was cut down. So give my time to the next guy who wants to talk more. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, Scott.
Ann Friday.
Hello, I'm Ann Friday. I'm a resident of Prescott. I'm here today representing the Sundog Disconnect Group. We're a newly formed group, rapidly growing, community-wide, and we're an action group to protect the environment, the water resources, and the wildlife in the Sundog Corridor. We oppose building a new freeway into Prescott's crown jewel. And recently, we've seen an alarming change in the SIMPO stance from a planning organization to an advocacy organization. SIMPO's role is to consider the perspectives of all stakeholders, such as Sundog Disconnect, in their planning activities. But in spite of this, SIMPO has omitted from their public presentations all of our very significant oppositional feedback to their Sundog Highway construction plans. Recently, I emailed all of you, county supervisors, and SIMPO, asking why only alleged benefits of the Sundog Connector are being promoted. And as you heard today, one of SIMPO's main points is that the Sundog plan has been in the works for decades, so we have to build it. But so too have our plans been in the works for decades, calling upon us to protect that area. We have the Prescott Citizens Initiative that was established in 2000, followed by the Open Space Acquisition Advisory Committee. The 2008 Prescott Council approved the Open Space Master Plan. And in our current Prescott General Plan, it says the Prescott community remains committed to the conservation of environmentally significant lands and features. The Sundog Corridor is a major regional wildlife stronghold and a connecting corridor for their safe movement. This proposed connector route would disrupt a well-established wildlife corridor and contribute to wiping out our biodiversity resources. And according to the Native Americans, when the last tree has been cut down, the last fish caught, the last river poisoned, only then will we realize one cannot eat money. We know that our regional water is poisoned by PFAS, our water resources are in overdraft. The Sundog Connector could open up the corridors to some 4,000 new homes that could use approximately 222 million gallons of aquifer water per year. Peter Krupnik of the CWAG Science Committee says, quote, "We're borrowing water from the future. We need more clarity in how we're paying it back. We need to pay it back, but I don't know how we're going to do it," end quote. In closing, the only way to do it is by adopting a paradigm shift from the old ways of addressing traffic congestion that inadvertently cause more congestion. This is a phenomenon known as induced demand, and we need to adopt new, more modern approaches to transportation planning. The same is true for water, wildlife, and open space protection. Please visit and like us on Facebook at Sundog Disconnect. Thank you.
Larry Springer.
I think we'll take one more, and we're going to have to wrap this up. We've got a voting meeting to move on to.
Good afternoon, Mayor Good and Council. I'm Larry Springer, a Prescott resident, speaking for the Sundog Disconnect Group. There is significant, growing, broad opposition to the construction of the Sundog Connector, and it is important that the Council and the public understand the negatives and alternatives to building the connector. This is not just a single neighborhood issue. This is a community-wide issue, and we all need more information. We request that the Prescott City Council schedule a study session soon to educate and discuss the Sundog Connector with Prescott voters, because the majority of the proposed connector is to be located within Prescott city limits. In the interest of transparency, we request at a minimum that the following topics be covered in the study section. Specific language in the development agreements that require the construction of the connector, as referenced by Mr. Gallegos on his January 16th KYCA program hosted by Councilmember Cantelmi. Latest cost estimates and funding strategies that are being considered. Latest alignment considerations. The impacts of the Sundog on the Glassford Hills State Land Acquisition IGA and any relationships between the two. Projected economic impacts to the Prescott Yavapai tribe and city due to the connector bypass of the State Route 69 business corridor. We would appreciate hearing back soon about scheduling this study session, because I think the community needs it. I think it would benefit the council, and I think it would do a great deal toward making us come to an intelligent conclusion about Sundog Connector. Thank you.
All right, we'll take one more.
J.D. Greenberg.
I'm J.D. Greenberg, and I'm from Prescott, and I'm speaking as a private citizen. I first went to the 2040 Regional Plan meeting that was held here, and I was appalled to learn that by 2040, it's anticipated that all of the highways around this area are going to be 6 lanes. So there was a grassroots effort started at that time, and one of the positive things that SIMPO has done that didn't get recognition in the formal presentation you were given was the formation of the EMAC committee. It's made up of representatives from the city of Prescott, including the wonderful Tammy DeWitt, who's our chairperson. There are people from the Forest Service, from Game and Fish, and the environmental specialists from ADOT, as well as 3 private citizens. The entire focus of this committee is to give input to SIMPO and the Technical Advisory Committee as they're doing their projects as to how mitigation can be performed to reduce the impact on wildlife. We have been asking, not only at the local level, but also at the state level, that all of the statistics that are gathered regarding casualties include wildlife. There are some for livestock, but there hasn't been anything separated out for wildlife. So I just want you to know, and to all of those who are concerned, and some of the previous speakers, about the impact of the Sundog corridor on wildlife, that would be one thing that the EMAC committee would be taking a very close look at. It's a positive thing that SIMPO did, that they actually created that committee. And I think that all of you are represented on it, all the municipalities as well as the county, and use us. We can help on projects in each of your municipalities, as well as focusing here in Prescott. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, J.D. All right, well, I appreciate all the public comment and the concern. This is obviously a very significant project, and I do want to emphasize that one of the options for the Sundog Connector is a no-build option. I've made public comments regarding the incredibly glacially slow process that ADOT works under. And we still have, I think, a number of projects that need to be completed, whether that's just widening the 1 mile in front of Frontier Village. But I think more substantial development of traffic flow from 169 all the way up to the 69-89 split is something that I think should be prioritized before this is even considered. Thank you all for coming, and now we'll move into our voting meeting. Excuse me, I think we have call to the public.
We do have an open call to the public. I don't have any green speaker cards that are not for this item. Is there anyone that wishes to address council regarding an item that's not on the posted agenda? No, okay.
Hearing none, then we'll move on to our consent agenda. Does anybody on the council want to pull anything from the consent agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull item F for discussion.
Very well. Then I'll entertain a motion for items A through...
It would be A through H excluding item F.
Okay.
I don't know why this has become my thing. All right. Mayor, I move that we approve consent agenda, items A through H, exclusive of item F.
Second. Motion is second. Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
All right. Council Member Rusing, item F on the consent agenda.
Yes. The reason why I pulled this is for some transparency as to what was happening with our library. As you know, our library is many years old on Goodwin Street, and it's built on a slope. So as a result, it has been very difficult for us to comply. We thought we were in compliance, but it was recently brought to our attention that our library was out of compliance as far as ADA handicapped parking. So as a result, we've been working with the U.S. Department of Education, Office for Civil Rights, and we have an agreement where we are promising to mitigate the problem and make our library as accessible as we can to comply with the federal regulation, because as a municipality, it is very important to us that we provide accessibility to all of our public buildings. Thank you.
Any comments or concerns from the council? Yeah, any public comment?
No.
Councilor
Mayor, I move
Fisher.
approval of item 8F for the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
All right, now we move on to item 9, consent ordinance.
Adoption of ordinance number 2023-1817, an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Prescott, Yavapai County, Arizona, authorizing the granting of a private sewer easement agreement to Thomas Contini and authorizing the mayor and staff to execute any and all documents to effectuate said granting. Adoption of ordinance number 2023-1820, an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Prescott, Yavapai County, Arizona, authorizing the granting of a utility easement to Arizona Public Service Company and Arizona Corporation, and authorizing the mayor and staff to execute any and all documents to effectuate said easement, and adoption of ordinance number 2023-1821, an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Prescott, Yavapai County, Arizona, amending Title 7, Chapter 7-4, Section 25C through H, and adding a severance clause, and adoption of resolution number 2023-1847, declaring Chapter 7-4, Section 25, entitled Solid Waste Management, and the attachment exhibit entitled Exhibit A, attached thereto, as a public record. That's it.
Okay. Do we have any proposal or presentation on this? Well, then I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to adopt consent ordinance items 9A through 9C.
Second.
Can we do all of them?
Yes, consent ordinance, we can do them all.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
That was pretty easy.
Public hearing and consideration for a new Series 12 restaurant liquor license application from John Mike Chen, applicant for WZ Asian Bistro, Sushi and Bar, location 576 Miller Valley Road. The application fees have been paid. The signs have been posted for the required 20 days. Staff has reviewed the application and determined that it is in compliance, and no public comments have been received. The applicant is present if council has any questions, or he was at least. Yes, he's here.
Well, come on up and tell us about your new restaurant.
Hi, my name is Mike. Hi, I'm surprised coming to talk, so I don't know what to say.
Well, I know.
We just opened a new restaurant in the Miller Valley Road, and we're hoping to have a liquor license. So, and I don't know.
Well, I know I've been to your bistro in Prescott Valley.
Yeah, we have one in Prescott Valley too, yes.
Don't you have one, I think, in Payson or somewhere?
Yeah, we have one in like Payson, Lakeside. We have a couple. And we just opened a new one in the Prescott in the Miller Valley Road.
Well, I think that's terrific.
Thank you.
I think we are pretty well saturated when it comes to Mexican food.
Oh, no, not Mexican food.
Right,
Yeah,
so
Asian.
I think with your conversion of that restaurant,
Variety.
Yeah, it used to be a
provides
Mexican.
another
Option.
option for restaurant meals. So we appreciate your investment in the city, and we wish you well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
Mayor, I move to approve liquor license number 220094 for new Series 12 restaurant liquor license application for WZ Asian Bistro Sushi and Bar, location 576 Miller Valley Road.
Second.
A motion and a second. Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
Congratulations, Mike, and we'll look forward to patronizing your Asian bistro. Okay. All right, we'll move on to the regular agenda.
Update regarding the Mayor's Charter Review Commission. Mayor and Council, I wanted to provide you with another one of our regular updates regarding the progress of the Mayor's Ad Hoc that is currently reviewing the Prescott City Charter and proposed amendments. The group has already selected a number of article sections to be amended. And pending council approval, these will be added to the ballot for the general election this year. Again, that's in November. I will be working closely with the city attorney's office to draft language based on direction from the commission. And at their next meeting, the language provisions will be provided for them to vote on, and then all of these will be presented at a study session to council in April.
Very good, thank you. Any questions or concerns? I think the committee's moving along pretty effectively.
They are. They're very focused and doing a wonderful job working together, so it's a great group.
Excellent, thank you. All right, item 11B, legislative update.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Tyler Goodman with the City Manager's Office. Give me a moment to pull up our legislative update. I won't take
Don't be so modest. You're the interim city manager.
Well, I am in the City Manager's Office, so that it was true.
No.
It's true. And I won't spend too much time going over every single one. We gave you about 10 or 11 bills, I believe, on this list. There's more still coming out. There's been 750 bills, probably more since I last checked, introduced for this legislative session. And I want to highlight the ones that would be of most impact to us. And of course, they have to do with tax cuts. And most people like tax cuts, but we'll talk about what that potentially could do for our city services. So the first has to do, there's two separate bills. One would eliminate the sales tax on food for home consumption, and the other would also eliminate the tax on residential rentals. And that may sound good, but it would be a huge hit to our general fund, which is directly correlated to our public safety, police, and fire. For just the tax on food for home consumption, if the bill were to pass as written, it would be a $3 million hit to our general fund each year and a $3 million hit to our streets fund each year, so $6 million total just for that. And for residential rental, it's about $1 million to the general fund and $1 million to the streets fund. So total impact just on those two bills could be $8 million to the city. I will tell you that the tax, the elimination for food for home consumption tax passed out of committee last week, 6-4. 6 Republicans voting for and 4 Democrats voting against it. And we were there testifying, Barry Aarons was there testifying with all of our information that we gave him, the impacts that it would have to the city. I know that this is priority number one for cities across Arizona. It would have such a huge impact on our revenues. So we're tracking closely. We're trying to figure out exactly what the strategy is, if there is one kind of behind the scenes, but we are monitoring this daily and testifying against it at every chance we have. I will also touch on 2 other bills that would eliminate...
Tell us what the Arizona League's position is on it.
The League is opposed, and they have been testifying against. They've been amassing all of the information from the 91 cities and towns. Unfortunately, the larger ones like Phoenix and Mesa don't levy a tax on food for home consumption, but they are still in opposition to it and expressing that as part of a precedent, right? If you're getting involved in city business from the state level, cities don't like that in general, and Phoenix is included. So they are actually speaking against it as well. There's 2 other bills related to tax reductions. The first would reduce the corporate income tax over a 4-year period.
Councilmember Roosing has a question.
Sure.
Yes, Tyler, I just wanted to make the point that we don't charge the full 8.35% tax on food, that there is a discount, and our tax on food is minimum at the least.
2%. And is Mark here? Mark, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, Councilwoman. Thank you, Mark Woodfell, Budget and Finance Director, for those of you who don't know me. The tax that isn't on food is the state and county tax, which is why it's easy for the legislators to want to cut that food tax. So it is just the food tax, so it's just 2% on food and residential rentals. So it is not a large tax, but it's still a tax.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to make the point that there's some questions about this being a regressive tax for people that are at very low income, have to rely on a lot of their discretionary income goes to buy food. But let's keep in mind that if they are eligible to be on this SNAP program because of their low income, they already are exempt from having to pay that tax.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you.
Proceed.
Two other bills that would have a financial impact on us. The first would reduce the corporate income tax rate. I think it's at 4.9% right now. I could be wrong, but it goes down to 2.5, I believe, over 4 years. So you can see on the far right, the top section here of the page, the far right would show the hit per year to the city through shared revenues. Those come through state shared revenues to us. So about $320,000 in the first year, all the way up to $962,000 in that fourth year, with those increasing, or I should say, greater reductions in the corporate income tax rate. And the bottom one would exempt feminine hygiene products and disposable diapers, which is not a huge impact to the city, but back to the reducing the revenues. So we're keeping track of all of these, and we will keep you posted as they go throughout the session. There's two other bills I wanted to touch on and open it to more questions if you have them. The first has to do with sober living homes. A bill was introduced that would allow counties and cities, it would authorize us to conduct inspections at sober living home facilities to ensure compliance with our fire codes as a city and zoning ordinances. This was assigned to the Senate Commerce Committee, and it will be heard tomorrow at 10 a.m. So that's the first step in that process. And the last bill that I'll touch on before I turn it over to you is the appropriation for the Glassford Dells Regional Park. You're all familiar with the progress we've made with Prescott Valley and Yavapai County, the State Parks Department, as well as the Arizona State Land Department. And this bill is Representative Bliss's bill. She is carrying it for us from our district. It would appropriate $3.5 million for this project to be split evenly between Prescott and Prescott Valley for fiscal year 24. And that would go directly to assisting us in purchasing land that we've identified and that we'll bring to you through our budget cycle this spring for this next fiscal year. So this would be a huge help to us. Barry Aarons has been a huge help. Representative Bliss has. Representative Wynn and Senator Bennett have all been very supportive of this. And we've also heard good things from the appropriation chair of that House Appropriation Committee, who's very supportive of this concept as well, which is a huge help if you're trying to get money across the finish line. Now, please remember that this bill will probably not be approved like a normal bill. This is to really carry us into the budget discussions, but having it in a vehicle like a bill shows what kind of support there is and what kind of people can get behind it. So that's the avenue we take when seeking for funding like this. With that, I'll open it up to any other questions you might have.
Well, I do know that we have a number of partners working together on trying to create this regional park. I think we've agreed on referencing it now as the Glassford Dells Regional Park so that we can connect the future marketing once we're successful on this to let people know that want to visit this park, that they'll have access to the Granite Dells in addition to the geologically significant Glassford Hill. So I think this is a good tactic to be able to bring this forward as a bill so that it has, I think, a little higher visibility when the budget negotiations occur at the end of the session. Councilmember Roosing.
Oh, I just would like to recognize Representative Selena Bliss for her efforts in hopefully bringing this legacy project to fruition.
And at least some of the public comment we heard today is pretty positive in supporting the creation of this park.
I think so.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item 11C.
Approval of City Contract Number 2014-165A2, an amendment to City Contract Number 2014-165 with Indigo Sports LLC, formerly known as Billy Casper Golf LLC, to add golf course agrimony and maintenance responsibilities.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council, members of the public. Joe Baines, Recreation Services Director. I put together a few slides just to give us a little background and a little context for our discussion today. So a little background. The North Course was built in 1956, so really from 1956 to 2014, the City of Prescott managed all facets of Antelope Hills. In 1992, I believe it was, we built the South Course, so we'd been performing that operation up until 2014. What happened in 2000 was kind of a downturn in the economy, aging golfers, and that really reduced the rounds. We were pretty successful financially up until about 2000, and then after that, we started losing money on a pretty regular basis. So like a lot of other communities across the nation, we went to put out a bid and went to a management style where we have a private company come in and manage the business operations. So that was 2014. We had good response to that RFP. We had 7 of the largest management companies in the nation bid on that, so that spoke well for our golf course. We ended up selecting Indigo Sports LLC, which was formerly Billy Casper Golf. So starting in 2014, fiscal year 15, we entered into that management agreement with Billy Casper, now Indigo Golf, of course, and they are a division of Troon, which is important in this conversation. So we contract with Indigo to manage the business operations of Antelope Hills that includes the golf and food and beverage currently. That's the way it works. All of the employees on the business operations side are Indigo employees. Troon, the parent company of Indigo, is the largest golf management company in the world, which does help with purchasing power and some of the other stuff I'll talk about later in the presentation. It's important to note that all of the revenues and expenses from the operations are the city's. So we still pull the strings. Really, Billy Casper, Indigo Golf, works as our agent. We meet with them regularly. We talk about strategies, and we even get involved in the hiring process for some of their key people. Indigo Golf submits a preliminary budget annually, just like the rest of the departments. That's reviewed by us at Recreation Services and then goes into the regular city budget process to be approved by you guys. Currently, the city still continues to perform the agronomy and maintenance responsibilities of the 2 18-hole golf courses. And I want to talk a little bit about Indigo's performance over the last, 6-7 years now, almost 8 years. We really experienced responsive leadership from them. A phone call to the national office gets answered. They're responsive. We have Tony Marino here, who's the regional general manager for Indigo. That's always been easy to get a hold of and work with. We have a solid general manager, has a lot of experience in Prescott. He's a Prescott guy, and he's doing very well out there. They've been good on their financial reporting. They've been timely with all of that. This national buying power, which I'll talk a little bit more about, just as an example, on the recent golf cart purchase that we did, it saved us about 20%. It was much better than any state contract that I could find that the city could do significantly. It was about a 20% savings, and the company threw in a beverage cart on top of that, too, which is about a $20,000 deal there, too. They have significantly increased the revenues, and I'll just put together a little chart. Actually, Mark put together this chart that shows where we started, and this is all Indigo Golf. The previous year, I didn't put on this slide, but it was at about 2.7. So it's about a 50% revenue growth over the period of time that they've been in. And, COVID kind of helped us a little bit in some things, but you'll see the food and beverage Here, this is the COVID year, so you can see that the food and beverage suffered a little bit during that year. If that were not the case, that would have been a steady rise pretty much all the way through. So we're up a little over $4 million in revenue now. We started this process and we were about 2.7, so that's pretty significant. And really what they do is they do a much better job of marketing. They do a much better job of running a business than a municipality can. So they bring a lot to the table. So some of the challenges that we have at Antelope Hills, and the reason we're bringing this to you today is that we think that with a different operating model, we can probably handle a lot of these capital improvements a lot easier. So during the years where the city was experiencing pretty significant revenue losses, a lot of the, especially irrigation and infrastructure, really wasn't kept up with, in a capital program. That was sort of deferred, and so we're paying the price right now. We have aging irrigation systems. I think if you'll remember, Council, I brought to you a study that had been done by an irrigation specialist, and he kind of went through all of our irrigation stuff, and we put together a really aggressive capital plan to address those needs. We have the North Course is 2002 irrigation system, and the South Course is the original irrigation system. So they're about 20 to 25 year life expectancy on those things, and we're starting to see it now with irrigation breaks. One of the things that we think that Indigo could bring to us if they do the agronomy and maintenance is the ability to perform capital projects in season. Right now, with our staffing levels, our abilities to do things like tee box renovations, we need to have temperatures where the grass can grow, so we need to be able to do that, but at the same time, we've got to keep up with the daily maintenance of the golf course. Indigo, with their other subsidiaries, can perform capital projects quickly in season without sacrificing the quality of play. They'll help a little bit with supply chain issues. Again, the largest management company in the world, they get things a little bit quicker. We found that out with the golf carts as well. We've struggled with our seasonal employee retention. That's something that's nationwide. We'll keep working on that, and it's getting a little bit better. And again, back to the 5-year capital plan that we've put together, it's pretty aggressive, and we're looking for a partner that can help us be more responsive to that. So the proposal in front of you today, it's a 5-year term that would add the agronomy and maintenance responsibilities for a flat fee of $2,500 per month, $30,000 per year. All of the existing employees would be retained as Indigo employees. They would no longer be city employees, but they would be retained by Indigo, just like we did with the pro shop side of things in 2014, and that worked out pretty well. Again, they would submit a budget through the budget process that would be reviewed by me and then be forwarded to council for their approval. Can't talk about the national buying power enough. The seed was difficult to get this year. There are some things, just like everywhere, some things you wouldn't think would be difficult to get that have gotten more difficult to get. We think we have a better shot of doing that. We would have some labor savings, although I must admit not significant in the preliminary budget that they've sent to me, but really that's because they're going to put more boots on the ground, which will help, the quality of play of the golf course, which is really important. Again, we have that growth trend going on with rounds. We want to keep up with that. We want to have a good product to present. So we would save a little bit in labor, but not as much as one would think. We would have internal cost savings. We wouldn't be providing the legal services and IT that we do now, so that's about a little over $100,000 a year right there. This is important too, the depth of knowledge and the depth of the bench that they have, that Indigo has, allows us, if we have, for example, we've had some fairy ring that grows in the fairways that we've struggled with over the years. We can go straight to a regional director of agronomy that has a lot more experience in dealing with those kinds of things and respond to it quicker. So that really helps us. And then again, in our aggressive capital plan and renovation plan to keep up with the demand at the golf course, I think they provide us a better partnership in that respect as well. And so with that, I would answer any questions. And again, Tony Marino, the regional general manager, is here if you have any questions for him.
Well, thank you, Joe. I know I played that course many times, both courses. And the improvements since the time that we went out to professional management has improved dramatically. We were experiencing a lot of financial loss when we managed it ourselves, and being able to reduce that into a break even, and who knows, we might even get to a positive on that, I think is from a financial point of view a much better arrangement. Now, as far as the quality of the course condition, I think we've made some gains there, and I think with Troon managing the agronomy and dealing with things like fungus on the greens and things like that are bound to be a big plus. Those courses are used significantly for competitive rounds, for college competition, for a lot of different things. And I know when you and I met with the, I think it was U.S. Golf, they were talking about this is one of the few municipal courses that's actually increasing in the number of rounds played rather than what's nationally going in the opposite direction. So I think it speaks a lot to the initial impressions that people that visit our city, whether they come in from the airport or drive in, I think it has a very positive immediate impact. So I appreciate this, and I'm somewhat familiar with Troon Golf and their management of a tremendous number of highly ranked courses throughout the United States. So with that comment, Mayor Pro Tem, you had a question?
I do. Thank you, Mayor. Joe, this sounds like a pretty straightforward way to progress. It seems like we're going to get a lot of enhancement with our bringing in Indigo to have a greater part in this. You had mentioned on the, I guess, on the food and beverage side that you're still kind of, you have a little bit of a supervision over some of the hiring process there. Is that going to be the same in, like, of the higher level people? Is that going to be the same in this relationship, or is there some necessity to defer to their judgment in terms of, like, a superintendent or something like that?
Thank you, Councilman Montoya. So really what happens is they'll narrow down, like for, in this case, it would be the superintendent. They'll narrow it down to 2 or 3 people, and then they'll bring me in and you know, take my input into who they hire for that. And again, I can't emphasize enough, we all the revenues are ours, all the expenses are ours, the strategies are ours with our partner. So really, it's just a better way, I think, to handle this growth and the playability of the golf course.
And it sounds like something that we'll see some real positive benefit for users of the golf course in the years to come from this relationship.
I'm convinced, yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rusing.
Thank you. Oh, I just wanted to comment. I view the golf course as working open space, and it's a beautiful area with great views, and I just look at it as part of our open space portfolio. Thank you.
Any public comment on this item?
No, Mayor.
I'll entertain a motion. Oh,
Just really quick.
Councilman Tenney, I did.
I just want to confirm something with you, Joe. It sounds like the total additional amount that we'd be adding to our contract with them is $30,000 a year, but I think I heard you say that we'd realize at least that much savings in legal and IT costs alone. Is that correct?
That's correct, and a little bit of savings in labor as well.
Okay,
yes.
okay. So that, I mean, that's super. Like many municipal golf courses, we're going to continue to operate at a loss overall, right? I mean, it's an amenity that we pay for in the city, just like we pay for streets and libraries and other things. The library doesn't make money, the golf course doesn't make money, but we're going to operate at less of a loss with this, and the conditions are going to be better going forward, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, Councilman Tenney, I'm optimistic that, you know, once we get caught up on capital, because again, there was a lot of deferred capital over the years. Once we get caught up on that, we could get into a scenario where we're break even or even making a little bit of money on it.
Great, great, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your work on this.
Very good. I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve city contract number 2014-165A2.
Second.
See, who is first?
Someone was second.
Who was the first?
Right. We had
Who's
a
on
first
first?
and
I
a
had
second over
Councilman Moore
here.
as the second, yeah.
Speed up a little bit there, Shishka. Okay. Please, we have a first and a second. Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you.
He's just a little cold.
All right, yeah, we're freezing
we're
in here,
freezing
so I'm
here.
trying to move a little faster. Okay, item 11D.
Approval of PLN 22-003, a preliminary plat of Peregrine Ridge at Prescott Lakes PAD subdivision, a 54-lot subdivision on a 26.44-acre parcel located east off Prescott Lakes Parkway via Smoke Tree Lane Extension. Site zoning BG Business General and MFM, multifamily medium density. Property owner Bear Creek Holdings LLC, applicant Lion Engineering. Location APNs 106-13-04K and 106-18-067N.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Tammy DeWitt, Community Planner at the City of Prescott. So as it was stated in the description, it is a 26.44-acre parcel, zone business general, and there's a little tiny portion zone multifamily. There's 54 residential lots proposed for this portion of the development. There's 36.7% open space that's proposed. 25% is required for a planned area development, so they exceed that. And the lots are ranging in size from 9,037 square feet to 13,422 square feet. Here's the map of the project. It's this parcel here, and this is the multifamily medium here. And we have a little bit of multifamily medium here too. So it's this lot right here we're looking at. Smoke Tree, Smoke Tree is over here, and this is Prescott Dells Parkway. Here's the imagery of the area. It is kind of close to the golf course. It is up on a ridge, hence Peregrine Ridge. So there will be some fantastic views from this property of the Dells and of Watson Lake. This kind of shows that different lot sizes and the proposed setbacks with the planned area development. They can have smaller lot sizes and reduce the setbacks, which are pretty typical that we see out in the Prescott Lake subdivision area. So there's a lot of question of planning and zoning and talk about the circulation. So right here is where the Smoke Tree extension will come out. So we have Astoria 1 here that's already developed. We have Astoria 2A and 2B, which is currently final platted, and it's being, I think it's going to the recorder's office. So we'll start seeing this start get developed. And then this is the Predator Ridge, the last phase of this area. So this kind of shows the circulation. This is from their traffic impact analysis that shows how it's going to connect up. It is a divided road that comes out from Smoke Tree, so it is going to be divided, which is really supported by understanding from the fire department because it does split the road, so they can close off a portion for emergency access out and have the other side for emergency vehicles. It also does connect down to Astoria 2, so that there is an alternate access that comes through Astoria and comes down out and out through Astoria Phase 1. And then, so that's the circulation, and also gives another alternate route for Astoria to come out through that way through Smoke Tree. All the houses will be required to be sprinklered because there is only one access around there. And that was in our review. This was reviewed by our reviewing agencies for a preliminary plat. And all the concerns were addressed in regards to trail access and historical information and stuff like that. So all those have been done, and it's been cleared to move forward through the preliminary plat and final plat process. At the January 10th Planning and Zoning Commission, they did recommend approval as of presented. And that concludes my presentation. I'm free to answer any questions, and we do have others here that can answer questions I can't, hopefully.
Councilman Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Tammy, do you mind going back to the slide that shows the plat? Yeah, thank you. So could you maybe touch on what the traffic plan is for the intersection of Prescott Lakes Parkway and Smoke Tree? Is there going to be a light there? Are we going to put in a new roundabout? How are we going to make that intersection safe? Because there's a lot of vegetation in the median, and you've got a curve, and you've got a downslope. And I think I'm not opposed necessarily to the development, but I'm very concerned about public safety and access in and out of that intersection, particularly it's a hill. You've got a lot of traffic with the school, with basis morning and afternoon, and traffic comes down that hill pretty fast. And if you got somebody slowing down to make a right-hand turn or somebody's trying to get out, that's a real concern of mine, is the public safety at that intersection.
Well, in looking at the traffic impact analysis, I didn't see any improvements required, but I think Ian is here. That might be able to shed some more light on more current discussions they've had with the developers.
I was just waiting to be asked. Ian Mattingly, Transportation Manager. So, the intent would be that with Astoria and this Peregrine Ridge, that there would be a traffic signal there. The intersection obviously was built as a three-way. Currently, southbound, it has a median. There's no left turn pocket. And it may also require some other auxiliary lanes, like a right lane into the site. Those details have been discussed as we've moved towards this process. Obviously, we're just here for the preliminary plat. And so the general layout of the lots, Smoke Tree as it's laid out, and then the connection obviously meet our intents. But as we work towards final plat and we get into the civil design, then we'll be working with the developer. And Astoria, on their other final plats, I think, they had some other plans for emergency access that now will have to change, and they'll make a connection more like this. So we'll work through those changes and then implement the corrections. Obviously, they'll participate, and we'll construct all these things, and then, it's not all on the developer. A lot of the traffic obviously is already there today, and so we'll have to work through all those processes. But certainly staff intends to do that and work with them, and so we'll see some major changes here. Vegetation changes, additional left turn, additional pockets, and different traffic control. No roundabout, though.
Okay.
It will likely be signalized. or
So
stopped.
really what we're talking about today, Tammy, is just a preliminary plat approval, but you're going to be coming back to us later with traffic
Well, as
control.
we
traffic.
move towards final plat, obviously, we have to, that's when we're getting towards the engineering plans being approved. And so all these details will be worked out with the developers, and we'll get all this stuff laid out. So today, though, they don't show you the exact intersection traffic control, and they don't show you those turn pockets and things because we haven't worked through that yet.
So is it anticipated that Astoria Phase 2A and 2B will be completed before this development proceeds?
And they probably start to get the engineering plans at the same time. So Astoria will come in right now and start doing their infrastructure, and then Predator Ridge will start submitting their engineered plans after this is approved to get going with that with the final plat submittal. So they'll all be kind of looked at the same time. Astoria's already had their engineering because the final plat's been approved. So as that's moving forward, but we'll look at it with Predator Ridge to make sure the connections are there with the plans.
I think it's pretty important for ingress, egress. These won't necessarily need to be sprinklered because they'll have two
No, they're
two
required.
sources.
They're required to be sprinklered.
Will be?
Yes.
Okay. That makes it even better. Councilmember Roosing.
Thank you. So Tammy, this will be a city-dedicated street. It won't be private.
Yes, it's a city.
And is there going to be a gate on it? Will it be a gated community?
No, not if they're city streets.
Predator Ridge, okay.
So Astoria will have access to Smoke Tree?
Yes.
Because I remember originally it wasn't going to have access, and they were going to try and access through Astoria Phase 1.
They'll have both access points through Astoria 1 and through up to the other one with Predator Ridge.
So this will be open then?
Yes,
right here?
and the one, this actually will probably be constructed as part of Astoria 2 because that's going to be part of their construction access. So it's not going through Astoria 1. So that was actually going to be developed with Astoria 2, if I remember right, that as an emergency and for construction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Astoria 2B had a proposal that didn't quite have the same alignment as Smoke Tree. They had basically an emergency access that they were providing in lieu of Smoke Tree being built because of the timing issues of both developments. And so this, by having Peregrine move forward now, they can tie their connections and we get the final Smoke Tree east leg built, and so things will change.
This looks like a big improvement compared to what we were looking at.
Yeah, and so, and the intent is for Astoria to have the dual accesses, And they're still going to go through Astoria 1, and then they'll connect somehow to Smoke Tree. I think this is slightly different than the plan set that they submitted just above. And so those final details, they're probably still working those out, but either way, Astoria will connect to Smoke Tree, and Peregrine will obviously connect to Smoke Tree.
And then I have another question about the zoning. The zoning for Predator Ridge is BG, Business General, but
Yes.
most people need to realize that includes residential and multifamily. So it is compatible with the Prescott Lakes Master Plan.
Yes.
And we got a letter from a Mr. Ralph Warrington. Apparently, there's 2 golf greens on either side of this development, and there's I drove out there this weekend, and there's a concrete golf path somewhere through here. And he was concerned how it was going to go across this intersection here. I was wondering if you had any thoughts.
Once we see the engineered plans for that area, then we'll make sure there's adequate access. And Recreation reviews all our plats too, to make sure there's all that connectivity through the area for trails and for alternate transportation.
All righty, thank you.
Councilman Tenney.
Thank you, Mayor. Maybe I didn't cancel mine.
Oh,
Sorry, mine still said 1.
Or I think you were up front.
Sorry, thank you, Mayor. I think it's important, and Kathy brought this up, that this property is zoned BG. And for residents of the Prescott Lakes community that were very upset about the possibility of large apartment complexes being built at Petroglyph Point, this is a really good alternative because we're getting residential instead of high-density apartments. So I think it's important for residents of Prescott Lakes it's a compromise probably. I mean, it's certainly better than having high-density apartments. So this is a good use of that land. I just want to make that point because of the zoning.
Right now, Councilman Tenney.
Well, great minds think alike, and so do I and Eric. Let that sink in for a minute. At any rate, I was just going to say the same thing with it being zone business general. I think, Tammy, you may have provided us the cover page for this. I was struck by the fact that with a parcel this large, we could be potentially looking at a total of 821 dwelling units, and we're looking at 54. So if I'm a neighbor here, I love this. This is the best thing that's happened in my neighborhood for a long time.
Well, particularly when you're talking about total number of residential units in high density and the consequential number of vehicles, my biggest concern is making sure that we have a very safe intersection there and we're able to move traffic in a safe and expedited way. So we'll have to rely on Ian Mattingly and his ability to make sure the developers put in the right type of intersection there. And I agree with you. I think there's much more safe ingress egress now that Predator Ridge can connect with the Astoria development and make sure the extension of Smoke Tree goes in there. I think it's just a much better alternative.
The applicant's here. Would he like to speak?
Luther Kraxberger, Bear Creek Holdings. Thank you. You guys pretty much covered most everything, and that was our goal: is to make a development that didn't max it out. So hopefully you guys like it. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them.
So you're not developing Astoria 2 and So are you coordinating your developments with the other developers of that one?
I imagine at some point we will.
Yeah.
We've kind of preliminarily talked, but wanted to get through this phase first just to make sure we're all on the same track.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions or concerns? Have any public comment?
We do, Mayor. Bob Sisley.
Good afternoon. My name's Bob Sisley. I am the president of the Prescott Lakes Community Association Board of Directors, and I'm speaking on behalf of the board, and so my comments are that of the board's. I'm going to disagree with staff, though, as far as access. One of the problems you have here, and this map is ideal, if you look at Astoria Phase 1, right where that label is, just to the left of it is a gate. So Astoria Phase 1 is a gated community. It's connected to Astoria Phase 2, and when Mike Van split 2A and 2B, it was because he was going to do that construction access there. But you see that little white road that goes from Phase 1 to Phase 2. That's Canmore, and that connects Astoria Phase 1 to Astoria Phase 2. It is not logical and practical, and the association would not approve to have Astoria Phase 2 be ungated. Because why would you have one end be gated and the other end would not be gated? So having access from Predator Ridge into Astoria Phase 2 and then Astoria Phase 1 is not practical. Astoria Phase 2 into Astoria Phase 1 is. That would be, that, and it hasn't been decided if that's going to be two neighborhoods that will have a connecting road or if that will be all one neighborhood. So I just wanted to bring that up to you first. In July, the Community Association Board of Directors reviewed the plans, and we agreed with a number of them. One had to do with the name change. We were fine. I don't think anybody wants to have a community name Predator, so that was fine with that. We originally, this was meant, and this picture shows 67 lots. The proposal is for 54, and we were completely in agreement in downsizing the amount of lots that were there. They also wanted to eliminate the gate that goes into Predator Ridge. If you see that extension on Smoke Tree, it kind of wanders to the east, and then there's a traffic circle with a green middle. If you go to the north, that was a gate. And if you go to the south, that's a gate that goes into Astoria Phase 2. The proposal for Predator Ridge is not to have a gate there. And the board was fine with that. I thought that if they had a gate, they might be able to get more money for the lots being a gated community. The question is going to be Smoke Tree extension from Prescott Lakes Parkway to that roundabout would probably become a city street. It would be conveyed to the city. The question is, when Predator Ridge conveys to the association, do those roads become city roads, or are those going to be private roads? Most of the neighborhoods in Prescott Lakes, if they're gated, they are private roads, and if they're non-gated, they are public roads. We have one exception, and that's the Retreat. It's our only non-gated, gated community, but those are private roads. So that was a question that we would have. It really doesn't make that much of a difference at this point because the neighborhood would fund, it would become limited common area, and the neighborhood would be responsible for funding the maintenance of that road. The one item that we're not in agreement with, and it shows it on this picture, but and the staff can probably maybe expand this a little bit more. There was a proposal to do away with the roundabout there and basically just have Smoke Tree come right into Predator Ridge. We were not in agreement with that. We thought that would have negative consequences for Astoria Phase 2, and we pretty much still like the idea of having Smoke Tree come into the roundabout. They could either go into Astoria Phase 2 or they could go into Predator Ridge. So the reason why all this is significant, as I said, this was presented to the board in July, and we corresponded with the representative that was just up here. I realized that, so we already went to the part about the access. I know that the city doesn't enforce community association governing documents, but in this particular case, we've talked about the apartments in the past. Those apartments were in the commercial association. They have their own CC&Rs, their own bylaws, et cetera. This piece of property is in the community association area of responsibility. And our the declaration, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but says no person shall record any declaration of covenants, conditions, or restrictions, or declaration of condominium or similar instrument affecting any portion of the properties without board review, written consent on behalf of the association, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Our attorney says that presenting this as to get a preliminary or a final plat needs association approval first. So right now, we have not given association approval for everything. We still have this issue with the roundabout. So that's a concern that we have. I would recommend that maybe the council, or unless it's going to be addressed between preliminary and final plating, that maybe the council consider tabling this until the developer and the association can reopen that discussion and come to an agreement to where they meet the what the declarations are. If they don't meet it, now the association has no other recourse but to look into legal avenues because they're bound by our declarations. So I know that you don't enforce our CC&Rs or bylaws and whatnot, but we do. And now because they own this or are either own it or going to own it, they have to abide by it. So that's where I'm at. Any questions for me?
Joe, what do you think?
I think it's correct that we don't enforce those community ordinances and their CC&Rs. I think the question brought up as it relates to access is important and one that is really to be determined by the time we get to final plat. I think that at this point, it's an analysis of the preliminary plat and essentially, as we've talked about before, line work. Though those other considerations, especially the road situation, becomes really relevant for final platting.
So I think your concerns probably could be addressed when we come to a final plat recommendation and approval process.
Yeah, we just wanted to get this on the table now to make you aware that we have not approved this platting or, as this says, prior to any instrument affecting any, or the recording of any instrument affecting any portion of the property still needs the association approval. Even requiring or requesting a preliminary plat without board approval, again, you guys don't enforce this, but now we're going to have to take on the responsibility of contacting our attorneys, have our attorneys contact the developer and say, hold on, before you go any farther, you need to have a meeting of the minds and get approval from the association. So I know that you're not enforcing it, but I don't think it should have gotten to this point. You know, we corresponded with Luther, and we've had good correspondence with him, and we got a response that said, thanks. And it's like, okay, but we denied your approval on one item. Where do we go from here? And all of a sudden, this pops up. So we just wanted to get it on the books, on the record, that we want to work. We are encouraging this development. We agree getting this and having, because the prior proposal was supposed to be horizontal apartments, and they pulled out of escrow before that happened. So we are all in agreement. But like I said, Predator Ridge, the way that we're looking at it, would not have access into Astoria because it's a gated community.
So is it really coming down to a determination of if and where the gates are going to be created?
We're okay if Predator Ridge does not want to put a gate into their neighborhood. That one little line that's above the green circle, if they don't want to put that in there, the board said that's fine. It's just we are asking that that roundabout be kept in place because, and maybe either the developer or the city can look at it. The plans that we saw showed Smoke Tree going right into Predator Ridge, and I don't know how Astoria was going to get access onto Smoke Tree, and that's obviously a concern.
Are we currently talking about an agendized item? Sounds like we're ahead of ourselves.
I think we're talking about the preliminary plat for this.
Tammy, could you put the preliminary plat up? Because we're looking at the wrong thing there
Why doesn't it not here?
as to what we're approving.
Sorry, I somehow don't have it on here. For some reason, it wasn't on my slides.
Oh, because we have
Sorry
it in
about that.
We have it in our packet.
This is from the traffic study, the traffic impact analysis. 'Cause it shows what was being proposed as this was being developed. But like we said, this is a preliminary plat. This is preliminary. What we're really looking at is the subdivision boundary in the lot layout. So when the final plat comes forward, we make sure it's in general compliance with that. But they will have to go all this other stuff in the background, their engineering, and figure all that out prior to the final plat coming to you.
Because the
So your primary concern is your community association's legal authority over how this development works?
I would phrase it a little different. It's our responsibility to correct the record and let people know, because there are some people from Astoria, and in fact, there's even a couple that are here today, to let them know that Predator Ridge and Astoria 2 is going to be driving through their neighborhood is a bit concerning. So it's basically, we want to keep the roundabout, and other than that, and just make sure that you guys know that Predator Ridge would not have access into either one of the Astorias. We're just kind of setting the record straight.
Councilwoman Cantelmi.
Just real quick, have you, within the board, oh, I'm sorry, I wanted to cancel that. Have you, within the board, discussed with the fire department a breakaway? Do you know what a breakaway gate is?
Yes, I do.
Have they talked about that to you at all?
No, we've never had any contact with the fire department. We're sticking with this particular plan. If Astoria 2 wanted to not put in a gate, and then you've got Astoria 1 with a gated community, the only alternative would be to have well, there already is a fire access from Astoria 1. See in the upper corner, the very top, there's like a little circle.
I see that, and I'm looking, if you look back down to your phase, Astoria 1, where you have the gate, and you've got the little section right there, yep, somebody just had the arrow on it.
Right.
Keep going up.
Yeah, right there.
Down, come down.
Well, if you stay right there, there's a fire access road right next to that circle. But are you talking about Canmore?
Well, if you're talking about prohibiting access into your development proper because you have a gate, and I'm assuming that you assume the cost of the gate. The structure of that is the fire department has approved what they call a breakaway. So you would have a breakaway.
Keep the comments on related to Predator Ridge.
Well, I am. It's for access. But just discover that, because that may take care of your problems.
We're aware of that. The problem is the developer on Astoria, Mike Fan, wants to have Astoria connected to Astoria 1. They want to do construction up Smoke Tree, but once houses are built, they want to have them allow access through Astoria Phase 1. So he wants Canmore to be open.
And that reason why, because that wasn't going to be constructed, there wasn't this phase was, Prairie Ridge wasn't coming forward at this time. So at the time when phase 2, when 2A came through and 2B, they do have just an access road with a fire turnaround here. There was not the construction of this at this time because they were waiting for Predator Ridge. But now that we have this coming forward, there could be talks about how we can better create this area with the engineers.
Yeah, the proposed maps are just a little bit weak on that. So I understand this will probably be ironed out, hopefully. We encourage the developer, the city, whatever, to reach out to us and include us in the talk so that we can approve any changes that need to be, so that we're not having to look at legal action.
Duly noted.
So
Councilwoman Cantelmi, Councilmember Roosing, you're done.
Oh,
Okay.
it looks like the applicant has something to say. In addition, I'd like to hear more from you about the roundabout.
Thank you. Yeah, we're happy to have that conversation and, get those approvals from the board. The way I read that email was different than that presentation. So we're happy to have a roundabout or a knuckle or whatever Mr. Sisley and Mr. Mattingly would prefer. That whatever's the best for safety and flow, that's kind of where we're at. Again, we're just going for the preliminary plat, layout, and connection. So,
Thank you.
Okay, any other further concerns? Any other further public comment?
No, Mayor.
All right, I'll entertain a motion on this.
Mayor, I move that we approve PLN 22-003.
Second. And the motion is second, please vote.
Passes 6-0.
All right, now we're moving on to item E.
SITE 22-014 and WSA 22-033, site plan review and water service application for a 209-unit apartment complex on approximately 13.9 acres. Zoning MFM, multifamily medium density, property owner the Tanbeck Company. Applicant Granite Basin Engineering, location APN 103-20-596S, southwest corner of Gateway Boulevard and Palmer Lane.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, Tammy Witt, Community Planner. So what's before you is a proposal for a 209-unit apartment complex. It'll comprise of a community center, a pool, a separate mailroom, and a dog groomer facility. Buildings 1 through 8 will be 3-story, and buildings 9 through 11 will be 2 stories, which meets the zoning requirements for height. So per the newly adopted City of Prescott water policy, any application that requires a water service agreement that has to go in front of the Water Issues Subcommittee also has to go through a planning process. So the subject probably have a question is right here. Here's the Gateway Mall. We have State Trust land over here, and we have the new Palmer Road that comes through here that cuts this property with this property here. And it's this one that does not have any improvements on it that we're talking about. It is on multifamily medium density, so the density that's proposed is allowed within the zoning district. This was sent out to all our reviewing agencies and reviewed. They had a couple of changes they had to meet to meet the design criteria, but as we bring this forward, it does meet all of our codes and ordinances as it's moving forward. Here's the site plan that's being proposed. These buildings along the edge here will be 2-story, and all the rest will be 3-story. This is the main access here. And then we have a secondary access here on the south. This is Gateway Boulevard over here, and this goes down to Lee Boulevard. Here's we have the community center, and all the amenities will be in the center of the property, and there's adequate parking and circulation throughout the development. So this was reviewed for a site plan, and it meets all the development criteria as it's being presented to you. At their December 8th, 2022 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, they voted unanimously to recommend approval as a project as submitted. So now we get into the water. So this is the one that brought up the discussion about the appeal process. So based on the water policy, that if they're asking for over 50% of what's left of the water budget, which we just started a new water budget in January, that they have to ask for appeal of that 50% rule. So this one, they're asking for 29 acre feet a year. So this was reviewed at the January 10th Water Issues Subcommittee meeting, in which they did unanimously recommend approval of an appeal for 29 acre feet per year. And that concludes my presentation. I'm free to answer any questions that you have.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to, Tanner, would you be willing to come up and explain a little bit of like kind of your sense of that actual water usage? Because I think when you said that at the Water Issues Subcommittee, it was useful. So it may be useful to hear some of that again, if you don't mind repeating yourself.
Sure. So my name's Tanner. I actually developed the Winfield at the Ranch Apartments, which is very nearby. And so as we learned about this new water, we ran basically a study. I don't currently own the Winfield at the Ranch anymore, but we currently manage it. My management company does. And so I've paid the water bills since inception. So I think one thing that's important to note as we learned about the water is just basically what we're comparing it to as a whole. So everything that we use now, especially on something on this scale, basically it does require low flow and green where possible. So at Winfield at the Ranch, basically when I go back from the last 12 months and I look at our water consumption, we're running, right around 7.5 cubic acres, I guess, is cubic feet. Acre feet. I'm doing the conversions. So, and this would be similar. So what's happening is, as we learned, is we're getting anything that's essentially over 4 units in the city of Prescott. So the average when we built Winfield at the Ranch, I think the next previous project was built 10 years prior. And so then the average apartment age in the city of Prescott is significantly older. So the data that we're gathering and using for the study, I just don't feel like we're necessarily comparing apples to apples.
So Tanner, based on looking at the water bill you have from Winfield, what is your best guess on how much water this would use?
Probably between 10 to 15.
Okay. Thank you.
So Tanner, 7.5 acre feet for how many units?
That was for 100.
For 100. And you've had about, what, 96% occupancy over the course of the time you opened until now?
That's correct. And actually what I did is I went back and I took the highest month ever at Winfield, and I basically annualized those, saying if we just ran very efficiently, then Winfield would be closer to 10. So as you know, it ebbs and flows with the season, but yeah.
Councilman Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Tanner, I just have a few questions. On the apartments, are they all going to have individual meters for water meters?
Each building will,
building, okay.
but the residents are responsible for the water, and so that's a fairly. It's important in multifamily because it also helps promote water consumption when somebody knows they have to essentially pay for what they're using as well.
That's why I was asking if they were going to be individually metered. Another question, we've recently been having discussions as a council about workforce housing or affordable housing in the community, and we've put together a workforce housing committee. And are these apartments going to be affordable for workforce housing? Or what market are you trying to appeal to with this project?
Certainly, yeah. Prescott's unique because you have renters by choice here, which I think I discussed was surprising. But yes, it will be workforce housing. And the way we define workforce housing is basically you can take whether it's a mile or a 5 mile radius, you essentially take the average income and you do a multiplier to that. And I guess a better way to say it is, can the people providing goods and services in the area afford to live in the area which they're providing goods and services?
Right, that's my question.
Yeah, and so based on this location, yes, it would be workforce housing.
Thank you. That's good to know. Councilmember Rusing.
Thank you. When we had our prior discussion, you threw out some statistics concerning Winfield. I was impressed that you went around and talked to your tenants and got some information. And you said the average age was like 49. And what was the average income?
Right around 101,000.
So definitely people with higher incomes are renting. And they were in the workforce also, weren't they?
That's correct. I mean, it's a because there's essentially a shortage, we get a large diversification that you might not normally get on a different development where you might target a more specific submarket. So, yeah, there's anyone from, I would say, at Trader Joe's to an attorney to a doctor to someone working at the car dealership. So it's, and when we started, when we built Winfield at the ranch, again, there's not a lot of data in Prescott. There's becoming more, as you guys are probably seeing in the interest here. But the Palmer is built much more by design. So we've been working on this for a long time. What we've learned is, for instance, like each building, this is a garden style apartment, each building will have an elevator, which in theory doesn't make a lot of development sense financially, but it's an amenity that is important. And so this particular community in this particular location, there has been a ton of thought into that. So the average unit size at this is a little over 100 square feet larger than Winfield at the ranch. And yes, you are correct. I met most of the renters at Winfield at the ranch. Even right before we sold, we went into their kitchen, we took polls, we asked what we can do better, what's missing. And so we compiled the list, and we think that we're pretty excited about this.
And then one more thing, did you touch upon LEEDs certification for your buildings?
Did I touch upon it?
LEEDs, the green certification.
Oh, yeah. So to finance a project like this anymore, basically Fannie and Freddie Mae incentivize anywhere from a half a point to a full point in percentage rate on the loan. So on this particular project, that would range anywhere from, $200,000 to $400,000 in difference. So, and that's even if they wouldn't finance, especially where we're at right now in the cycle, it's required. So that would be anything from your windows and obviously low flow, sprinklers, that type of scenario.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Tenney.
Thanks. Quick questions. Appreciate you doing the comparison on water usage to Winfield, because as you say, that's going to be more comparable than almost anything else we have. Is there a pool at Winfield?
There is.
Okay, so that's great. Oh, shoot, I was going to ask or mention something else, and then I've lost it. So you must be good. All right, thank you.
Well, thank you, Tanner. I just think this is the right development in the right location and really at the right time. A lot of these potential residents are going to have a significant amount of discretionary income, and I think having them right across the street from the mall continues to provide additional foot traffic and customer base for the resurgence of the mall activities.
My brain stopped cramping. I remember what I was going to say.
Was that what I was talking about?
It was piggybacking on what you said.
Okay.
May I, just really briefly? Yeah, I agree with that. It's great that it's next to the mall and help revitalize that. The other piece is, I mean, obviously we're not in a position to tell you, hey, you got to rent these for $1,200 a month or something that we would consider to be workforce housing or affordable housing. But as the number of apartments in town increases, obviously that's going to have an impact on rents overall. As the supply increases, that's a helpful thing. So I'm really in favor of this on a number of levels. A lot of other pieces of this are attractive as well. Sometimes when somebody says, hey, I want to build 25 apartments here that's already zoned for this, et cetera, we get people saying, not in my backyard. I moved here 2 years ago, and gosh darn, nobody else is going to move next to me. And I don't think we're going to have too many people at the mall say, don't you put an apartment next to me. So this is great.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. The one thing I will just say to kind of speak to something that you said, Tanner, that I think I've seen in my business is sometimes people get to a period of retirement where they've owned a home, they've raised their kids, and then they don't really want to take care of a home anymore, and they kind of want to limit down kind of what they're doing. And in fact, I have a client very recently who he and his wife sold their home, and they said, we're not ready to go into an assisted living facility yet, but we do want to not have the outside maintenance of maintaining a home. So there is, when you fill this void for people like that, those are less people that are going to rent other apartments that may be more in that vein of workforce than this is potentially. So I think Councilman Tenney said it right, and so did the mayor. This is increased supply, and it's ultimately going to benefit the community.
Councilman Shishka.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just want to appreciate you guys for helping to revitalize the mall, because this is going to go a long way towards doing that, being right across the street. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any public comment?
No, Mayor.
Thank you, Tanner. I appreciate it, and good luck with that. I'm sure you won't need it.
Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve SITE 22-014.
Second.
And a motion is second. Please vote.
Passes 6-0.
Mayor, I move to approve WSA 22-033.
Second.
And motion is second. Please vote.
Passes 6-0.
Congratulations. Thank you. All right, we'll move to item F.
SITE 22-017 and WSA 22-026, site plan review and water service application for an 81,600 square foot building with leasable suites on approximately 4 acres. Zoning IL, industrial light, property owner investment potential LLC, applicant NCC Prescott, location APNs 102-03-046 through 102-03-049, 2218 Cirrus Drive.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Tamara DeWitt, Community Planner. So this would be combining 4 parcels into one, and they're proposing an 81,600 square foot building with suites for lease. It is industrial property, so there'll probably be industrial uses in there, and they'll lease the individual suites or combination of suites and to operate their businesses out of there. We seem to see a lot of this going on up in the north area in our industrial area. And this is another one that, per the water policy, that if it requires a water service application to go in front of the Water Issues Subcommittee, that a site plan review is required to go through planning and zoning. So this subject property is here. It is located next to the airport. they will have to do all their 7460s and all the other acronyms that we can come up with right now. Navigation easement and everything. So here's the subject property, the imagery. So it is 4 lots, and they will be combined into one. And it is in zone industrial. So here's the site plan that's being proposed. They have the main access here, and they have the circulation that goes around. This has been reviewed by the fire department, so it meets all their requirements for fire access. And then they also have parking that's along the back. Since we don't know what exactly the uses are going in here, we tried to encourage them to put in extra parking, so as the uses start filling up, the suites start filling up, we don't run out of parking. So they put adequate parking all around the properties for future needs and meet all our landscaping requirements that were proposed. And this is a floor plan of the proposed suites, which can change as people start leasing suites with the tenant improvements. And the elevations of the building. It will be a metal building going out there. So at the December 8th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, they unanimously voted to recommend approval of the site plan as submitted. The Water Issues Subcommittee did review this at their January 10th meeting and also voted to approve the application as submitted for 1.02 acre feet per year. And our public works people tried to do everything to try to figure out how to get down below the 1 acre feet, and we just couldn't do it. So hence it's in front of you today for 1.02 acre feet per year. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm free to answer any questions.
You know, Tammy, if we had modified the landscaping requirements and they didn't need the necessary required landscaping, would that have gotten below 1?
Possibly. Our concern with removing landscaping requirements, we start creating heat islands.
Right.
So that's another, catch to it. If we start reducing our, and which we will find out from the general plan. One of our questions that we're asking with the general plan is that, do you want to become a tree city, which requires more trees? So, which by the airport we don't want, because we don't want that by the airport. But it is minimal landscaping that's required just in their parking areas to help minimize the heat island effect, because if you have all that concrete in the building, it gets very hot around there, so you got to have something on the ground to help mitigate that a little bit. So that's why we have the landscaping requirements in the parking areas, mostly when there's that many parking spaces required.
So are the tenants in this going to be lease tenants?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not a condominium deal.
No, it's not.
Okay. Yeah, I know, talking to some of the previous planning and zoning commissioners, nobody that's on the commission now, they had been approached by a number of businesses that wanted to either relocate or possibly startups, and they just didn't have the option to be able to find a pre-constructed available lease parcel. And I think finally we're recognizing that there is a big demand here, and having a developer go ahead and build something like this, I think, is going to be very beneficial for additional industrial light or other types of commercial uses around the airport. So I think that's terrific. Councilman Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Tammy, I know this isn't a requirement of the city with development, but you were talking about a heat island and the amount of asphalt and the size of this metal building. But is there some way that maybe down the road we could look as a city requiring solar on these large buildings to generate electricity and just be more eco-friendly?
That's something that can be looked at. It'd be hard to require it because that would be an additional cost and could be other legal, challenges.
I'm just thinking as a city, we probably want to move businesses and homes in that direction, that we want to be, more sustainable as a community with the environment. And I don't know what that would look like as far as how that would go into a city code or something like that. But when you were talking about the heat island, just made me think about, gosh, this is a tremendous opportunity to have solar. I mean, we're seeing that now in like parking lots at schools and different places where they're utilizing that space and just putting up solar panels, and then you have covered parking, for example, and it's a real win-win situation.
Council Member Roosing.
Thank you. I also noticed your concern about Heat Island, and since it's in an industrial area, it looks like landscaping would be perfect for some artificial turf. Does artificial turf help alleviate the Heat Island, or does it matter?
I don't think it matters. It's mostly creating shade.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or concerns? Do we have any public comment here?
No, Mayor.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve Site 22-017.
Second.
Motion is second. Please vote.
Passes 6-0.
I think we've got one more here.
One more.
Mayor, I move to approve WSA 22-026.
Second.
Motion is second. Please vote.
Passes 6-0.
Thank you, Councilman Shishka.
Nicely done.
All right, we'll move to item 11G.
Approval of city contract number 2023-129 with WSP, formerly Wood Environmental, for design and related engineering services for the Watson Lake Water Enhancement Project.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're going to shake it up, move to a different pot of water now. For your consideration, as the clerk noted, is a design and related engineering services contract with WSP, formerly known as Wood Environmental, for Watson Lake Enhancement Project. We do have funding available in the Aquifer Protection Fund to the amount of $108,870. Brief background here: in 2004, Watson Lake was identified as an impaired water body by the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality and the Environmental Protection Agency. It languished in that state for quite a while until 2015, when the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality compiled a total maximum daily load document, otherwise known as a TMDL, that prescribed reductions for the different jurisdictions contributing pollutants to that water body. That document's largely been ignored, but is being remodeled in the coming year. This project seeks to address some of those pollutants, namely dissolved oxygen deficiencies that are associated with excessive nitrogen and phosphorus. This is looking at two specific components, the first being aeration. It'll evaluate what type of aeration is best going to help increase that oxygen, make it a better fishery, and help reduce some of those harmful algal blooms that we encounter anywhere from June into October or November. Within that, there's a number of different kind of features, from the type of solar bee floating islands that we see at the Sundog Water Treatment Facility. Those are solar powered, but they provide an aesthetic issue. They're subject to vandalism. And so comparing those to a bottom diffuse aeration, where we've got a weighted line that is releasing oxygen from the bottom of the lake towards the surface, would be part of the design considerations that we're looking at here. We want to make sure that when we go to install one of these features, it's something that's not going to be subject to vandalism, is going to be consistent with the recreation and aesthetic uses of it. I've seen 3 different references to Watson Lake here today already, so it's an iconic setting that we don't want to mar by excessive surface disruptions. Solar powering for these devices versus hardwired landlines are also in consideration as well. Locations, number of them to meet the waste load reductions, all of those things would be part of this design component. The second part of it is some of the required design components for fish barrier construction. As Watson Lake has demonstrated in the last 2 to 3 weeks, it can be a very dynamic and powerful beast. And we want to create fish barriers so that we can have a biocontrol for the primary production of weeds that can be both a boating hazard, but also contribute to our kind of our negative nutrient cycling that is, again, contributing to a loss of oxygen, but then also those harmful algal blooms. And so there's a lot of components that are entwined with that, from the 2 spillways that have release valve, the crosscut canal, as well as the upstream kind of barrier that would be considered. We'd have to coordinate with the Department of Water Resources to maintain dam safety. We don't want to do something that's going to jeopardize any component of stability to that feature. We have to coordinate with Game and Fish with regards to stocking. Whitemore or grass carp, as they're commonly known, are regulated by Arizona revised statute. So we want to make sure we're consistent with all of that for a closed system so that T&E threatened and endangered species below us are not negatively impacted. WSP was direct selected for this due to their history with the lake. We've been working with them since I've been on board here about 6 years now. They did a comprehensive full year's worth of monitoring on the lake, so they're intimately familiar with the lake and some of its quirks. And we are confident that they'll be able to provide our next steps in making that a healthier and more attractive place that also improves the water quality for our future. With that, I will be happy to take any questions you may have at this time.
Councilman Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt, I appreciate your presentation, and I do have a question. Creating fish barriers is a really good concept, but sometimes the way Watson Lake, when it overfills like it is right now and it backs up into Watson Woods, it's not like you have a channel anymore. You have this widespread disbursement of water throughout Watson Woods, riparian preserve. Would you have to put your barrier so far back in that situation because of the way when the lake level goes up, it goes into the Watson Woods and floods the channel completely?
Absolutely. It becomes a very large, extended wetland.
Yeah.
And so, how do you all of a sudden have a barrier rather than having it at 50 feet wide when you're looking at something that's the full width of that corridor?
Right.
So one of the considerations that would be in play would be going backwards and looking at a place like Industrial Way where we already have a 4-foot spill in place already. Rather than recreating the wheel, if we can modify an existing one, that would save us money and make it easier to maintain in the long term. And so that's the type of thing we'd be looking at.
So when you're saying Industrial Way, that's the entrance to the old Fane and down to where Pepsi and Yavapai Block is,
exactly.
with that drop.
Yeah, there's
where
a
the
pretty
fish couldn't get up.
significant block there. I was just sampling water out there last week. Beautiful little waterfall.
You know, Matt, tell me about this white aimer fish. What's the history of it? I know it's been used in other locations with similar needs and benefits.
Yes, so there's a couple of fish species that are preferred for this kind of herbivory to reduce some of the primary production of those aquatic and emergent weeds. In warmer climates, you might consider tilapia. CAP, their canals use the Whitemore extensively. They are a certified triploid, which means they're sterile, so that we're not going to have a huge breeding population, should they migrate upstream, lacking a sufficient barrier. It is kind of an ongoing and adaptive management issue, and so there would be an initial stocking rate. They kind of cruise around. They kind of turn into like giant sea cows, so they're a little bit of an entertainment feature as well for those that are out paddling or angling. And so that would be an ongoing management issue we coordinate with Rec Services. Tim Legler's had regular communications with Game and Fish on this issue and has a permit in place to stock places like the golf course where we want to keep some of that vegetation down due to its nutrient-rich waters that are there. And so it's one of those issues that would become an operational after the barriers are constructed. And so we would monitor it and adaptively manage the stocking rate to get the desired benefits without overstocking and having potentially negative impacts.
So it's good to know that CAP has been working with this particular species for quite a number of years then, right?
Yeah, it's an active part of their management. You see that down in the valley quite a bit when you see these big, almost carp-like fish walking through the canals. Or not walking, but kind of cruising. They're almost that big. But yeah, they're kind of cruising through the canals, and they're monstrous. Yeah, because they browse and browse and browse, and they can really become huge critters. And so, wow.
Well, let's not scare the kayakers away.
They'll fall in.
Well, it sounds like a pretty good plan here. Now, this is just for design and engineering. So construction is going to be what?
It would be phased in. This is a fairly fast moving, and so from the notice to proceed to completion of this portion of it, we're looking at or under 5 months. And really, the sooner the better as far as we're concerned. I'm meeting with Department of Environmental Quality, ambient water monitoring folks, the TMDL folks a week from today. This is established in our lake management plan that was finalized in 2020. And so this part is really kind of a gateway and allows us to really start marching and making progress going forward.
Well, I know with the total maximum daily load requirement, we really need to continue to move here a little more expeditiously than we have, right?
I would concur. DEQ is ramping up to look at these issues on a much broader scale. They've been essentially identified as not meeting their requirements with regards to updating their TMDLs every 5 years. TMDL for the lake was in 2015. They should have started remodeling that number based on data that we collected and provided to them 2 years ago. They didn't do that. They're ramping up based on new fee structures that you'll hear about down the line, probably associated with the budget process. But they're also hiring up a lot of ambient surface water monitoring folks, and that's why we're sitting down with them next week so that we're all on the same page from the start.
Very good. Councilmember Rusing.
Thank you. I just would like to comment that I'm thrilled that we're doing these eco-friendly options rather than the old-fashioned herbicides and dredging options.
Thank you for that, noticing that. We definitely want to look at those things that not only from an initial cost outlay, but for the long-term operational nature of it, minimize the cost to the city so we're not creating a behemoth for ourselves to manage. That's the advantage of things like the Whiteamore. They're out there doing the work when we're home at bed. So that's the way we'd like to keep it.
Councilman Moore?
Just a quick question. Are people able to catch those fish, or do they have to be catch and released?
They can if they want. They're vegetarians, so they're, you might be able to kind of annoy them into a strike. But you're not necessarily going to be catching one on the fly. And so, yeah, and that's part of the thing that we would look at, coordinating with rec services, just so that we could get signage up, but it's unlikely that many are going to be able to catch.
All right, any other concerns or considerations? Do we have any public comment?
We do not.
I'll entertain a motion then.
I move to approve city contract number 2023-129.
Second.
Motion is second. Please vote.
Passes 6-0.
Good luck with that, Matt. Thank you. All right, now we're down to 11H.
Approval of city contract number 2023-137 with Priority Ambulance to provide dispatch services for emergency medical services and transport through the Prescott Regional Communications Center.
Well, thank you very much. I kind of smell an opportunity with the sea cows. I think we can turn it into a revenue generating. People would come to see them. I think.
Especially if they're walking.
Walking.
No question, that would be a major hit.
I've done a lot of thinking back there this afternoon. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And I really want to highlight that this is an opportunity. And as I talk through this with you and answer any questions, I want you to know that it really is the work of Dr. Jim DeLong, whom we brought on board about 21 and a half months ago to manage our Regional Communications Center. So I am very proud that the Regional Communications Center is part of my area of responsibility at the police department. And we really haven't looked at it as a for-profit entity here in Prescott. And this is kind of a different flip on that, but this is an opportunity for a public-private partnership. And I really want to narrow this discussion to the relationship that we have with Priority Ambulance, who is new to our community, having gained a certificate of necessity through the state of Arizona very recently. And Dr. DeLong was approached by Priority Ambulance, who is here, not ironically, in a wheelchair. I've had the opportunity to meet with them several times, so I feel comfortable poking fun at you. But and they approached us at PRCC about providing dispatch services for the company. And at first I was a little hesitant because it's new and it's different. But when we really talked through it, we saw it as an opportunity not only to enhance our service offerings at PRCC, but as importantly and more importantly, a way to keep our community even safer. And we'll talk a little bit about that if you have questions, but our fire department partners are here as well and are on board with this move. So what you see in front of you is a contract with Priority Ambulance to provide dispatch services for emergency medical services and transport through our PRCC dispatch center. The billing model that we have set up for this is similar to what we have in place for our public safety partners. However, because everything is going to be automated and because Priority has chosen to take full advantage of the technology that's available to them, it really is very seamless. It will not require any more staff. It will not require work on behalf of our staff, but it will allow our staff to provide better service to our fire partners and to our community in the end. So we're going to bill them at 40% of our normal calls for service and anticipate that the first year that they are with us as a customer, that they'll bring approximately $180,000 into our center. What that means for our partners, our police and fire partners that we dispatch for, is an offsetting of their annual costs for our public communications services. So it really is a win-win for us all around, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about it. And if I can't answer it, I'll ask Matt to come up here now.
Well, I think this is a great development. We've always been kind of held hostage, so to speak, by only having one ambulance service and one certificate of necessity. So trying to negotiate adequate vehicles and be able to really provide adequate response times from the ambulance part of it has been a bit of a challenge. And I know Michael and I have talked to them over the last several years trying to get a really quality contract to make sure that we had the ability to provide those response times, both then, now, and in the future, continue to be a challenge. So I think having a second provider here is bound to lower costs, like you're just proposing, provide better service, and be able to really assure the public that we're going to have good response times when it comes for a necessity for ambulance services being provided on site. So I think this is in pretty good shape. Joe?
Yeah, I just feel like I need to address that. This doesn't necessarily change our contract for ambulance services, and I understand that their presence here can help in emergencies, but for our primary business, we have a contract, and this doesn't impact that, so just wanted to
We do, but we do now have a second provider in the community that can provide service over and above what our contract has.
Yes, that is true.
Yeah. Any other questions or concerns? Do we have any public comment?
No, Mayor.
All right, well then I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve city contract number 2023-137.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Passes 6-0.
All right, moving. Thank you, Jim. Moving right along.
Discussion for review and approval of the City of Prescott 2023 strategic plan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tyler Goodman, interim city manager. Still getting used to that. Can't be humble anymore, I guess.
What department is that, right?
It's in the city manager's office. If you weren't sure, pretty sure that's where it is. Just as a little recap, you met twice with Barry Aarons to receive some facilitation on your strategic plan and to update it. We took those comments, those changes, and incorporated them into the plan. And what we did was we took that to our department heads and staff, and we met in this room, and we met for a couple hours, and we looked at all of the strategies which really pertain to what staff does in order to achieve your council goals in the strategic plan. And there weren't a ton of changes, and so I'm not going to go extensively, and I know it's late, it's been a long day, but I'll highlight the ones, and I'll show the red line version up on the screen of what staff either tweaked or added or maybe took away from those strategies. So we'll dive in and we'll try to get through this as efficiently as possible. Let me zoom in for a minute here. So under the first goal of maintaining a stable general fund, the second objective was to provide adequate and stable funding and flexibility to maintain a balanced budget as required by the city charter. What we did is we took a strategy from below, which we thought fit better under this one, take a leadership role in forming local partnerships to seek infrastructure and other funding. And we also added another strategy, which is to explore the options of adding grant writing resources. We had a good discussion as staff about what we've done in the past to add grant writing resources, whether through contracts or through, in the distant past, city employee. And we'd like to take some effort and explore those options again, whether it's contract or maybe hiring somebody for that purpose. So we added those two. Under number 3, monitor the city's PSPRS unfunded liability status. We added a couple strategies, which is to implement a policy and mechanism to quickly pay down any future unfunded liabilities as they accrue, and then follow PSPRS board actions and state initiatives to evaluate impacts on the city's funded status. A lot of this comes through our finance department and also the city manager's office, but we felt those were important. And then under 4, like I said, we removed this one and added it up here. And felt that that was covered well up there. So that's why we cleaned that up down there. Goal number 2, economic development. Your first objective was to take better advantage of community assets. We had a really good discussion about these things. The big takeaway, the addition there, bolster industry and business growth, job creation and sales tax revenues. Consider an economic development study to assess impacts of land around the airport and evaluate opportunities for economic development in the air park area, including the marketing and sale of the W parcel. So that was a big addition that we talked quite a bit about. And then jumping down, we added facilitate and promote healthcare. We also had a good discussion on healthcare and how that can be a detractor from economic development if we don't have adequate healthcare. So we added that here. And we also added and other suitable companies as new and continued presence in Prescott, and added by having relevant economic development information available for interested businesses. So being more nimble on our feet, if businesses are coming in, we have the information they need to make them successful and make them attracted to working with us and being here. And finally, consider creating an economic development strategic plan to potentially include a commercial corridor study. That was also added. And just a minor change under number 3 here, we added under a strategy to ensure the needs of the community are met, basically describing why would we establish that data about growth to track the number of jobs, residences, and population. It was to ensure the needs of the community are met. That could be public safety, that could be utilities, infrastructure, you name it. Under airport, the objectives, under number 1, enhance public safety by protecting the airport from encroachment by non-compatible development that would impede its airspace. We added a strategy, acknowledge and better utilize regional commonalities to support necessary airport and airport growth, development, and roadway access. And then below, we added to this bullet point, to bolster industry and business growth, job creation, and sales tax revenues in conjunction with the potential strategic plan for economic development, as referenced above in that other goal, and the assessment of land around the airport. So tying those two things together. And then we cleaned up some of this funding. We talked about assessing the funding option of creating a special district for the airport area. Mark Woodfield did research on that. I know John Heine, Robin Sabata had all discussed that. And it just turns out it's not a real viable option. And so we decided to remove that from our staff strategy since we really don't support the idea at this point. Some other minor things, maintenance and growth of commercial air service, and then support airport safety and security. And under that, collaborate with public safety to remain cognizant of response requirements for the airport. Diving down to quality of life, under number 2, evaluating within the calendar year the feasibility of establishing an ongoing dedicated funding mechanism for the purchase of open space. The strategy that we added from the staff level was collaborate with the General Plan Committee to review the 2009 Open Space Master Plan to identify priority open space. So the idea, Joe Baines, that was his input. We already have a master plan. It's obviously well dated now, but we think the information could still be good and relevant, and maybe we could add upon it. And if we are to identify an ongoing funding mechanism, if that's council's desire, then we really should have also priority open space in mind to go along with that. And under the strategies below for the natural resource preservation and conservation, we added a few words here: support current and explore new conservation measures to maximize water availability. And then Joe Baines also wanted to add utilizing conservation easements, deed restrictions, ordinances, and other methods to preserve open space for recreational purposes. Under number 6, highly rated, do you have a comment, Mayor?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Tyler, can you go back up to the one about open space with the general plan committee? Do you have any thoughts on what that process is going to look like through the general plan, or does staff have any formed out? The reason I ask is that I think at some of the general plan committee meetings they've talked about the idea of maybe forming a working group or a subcommittee. Is that kind of what you envision, or is that what Joe, I guess more specifically Joe Baines envisions?
Yeah, I think in conjunction with community development staff, I think that would be a good recommendation, right? If they are breaking off, definitely somebody needs to take a deep dive into what already exists on the books.
Okay.
And we figured that group, having already been churned up for the work, they're ready to do it. We thought that'd be a good body to use.
Yeah, I think there's some members of that committee that are specifically pretty interested and engaged on that specific item. So I think that leveraging them as a resource would be a really good idea.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, number 6, highly rated city services. We added a strategy: consider using a survey tool to measure citizen satisfaction and the efficiency and effectiveness of city services. We can do that pretty easily. Under number 7, plan and budget to improve response times and additional facilities for first responders. Chief wanted to add evaluate alternative delivery mechanisms to provide optimal, effective public safety outcomes. So it's looking at maybe some creative solutions, some innovative solutions, along with the capital, the buildings, the fire trucks, those types of things. Number 8, improve planning, budgeting, management of the traffic flow, traffic enforcement, pedestrian interface with the city. We added complete a traffic master plan within the calendar year. That's something that Public Works is already working on, and wanted to highlight that that's forthcoming. We just changed a word there from money to funding, no big change. We referenced again under service-oriented culture, the first objective, and under strategies we added this reference to a survey, which we just talked about. And also, we changed the wording here, a culture of yes, to a solution-oriented culture, which really gets to the heart of the matter. And then a minor change here, foster a culture that enhances employee morale. And those were the changes that we came up with. I'm happy to answer any questions, or I know that Councilmember Roosing had some other input about the vision and mission, and we'd be happy to talk about that, but I'll turn it over to you, Mayor and Council.
Councilmember Roosing.
Thank you. Well, I'm thrilled with all the work that we've done on this strategic plan. I'm very proud of it, but I just have 2 comments on our vision and mission statements. I feel that they need a little refreshing. To be the premier community in the Southwest sounds kind of like we might be Sun City or something. And also the definition of the Southwest includes Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and maybe Texas. So is that really what we are trying to be? So I just suggested, it's not, I'm not dying on this hill, but a vision would include to foster a vibrant economy and quality of life unique to Arizona. If you agree with that, or I'd appreciate some input. Thank you.
Councilman Tenney.
I don't disagree that our vision and mission statement could maybe use some burnishing. I don't think that 6:15 in the evening as part of a voting agenda is the best time to do that. Typically, if an organization is looking at the vision and mission statement, they put a fair amount of effort and time into it. So we might consider that for an upcoming study session. I really like the idea because I think some of this wording is probably a little outdated, and we could.
Isn't this due? Don't we have to turn this in?
We don't have to turn it in.
There's not
Turn it into the
assigned-
state legislature?
We are talking to the former principal and teacher, but we don't necessarily have to. We did turn in our legislative agenda.
Okay.
Which we also correlated with this quite a bit, but this doesn't have a hard deadline. Although if you do approve it today, we will be posting it to our website. That doesn't preclude us from talking about it and updating it as soon as we get those updates. So it's really up to you on the timing.
Okay, and then moving on to the mission, I mean, we will embrace our unique past, maximize our current opportunities, and be a catalyst for our future prosperity. And I just don't think it reflects any of our personality that we have in the community. And so I would suggest, by preserving our historic past, we will maximize our opportunities in the economic, educational, healthcare, cultural, recreational, and historic sectors in order to ensure a better future. Just wanted something a little more up to date. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Clark on this. I think it's the timing is probably not super great for. I heard everything you just said, Kathy, but I don't know that I cogitated at all. And not because it was badly said or anything. I think I'm just not at my sharpest right now at this point in the meeting. So I would just say I think that I would agree with Councilman Tenney's suggestion. I think, it's the great type of thing that we could kind of haze a new city manager with, is making him come in and help us figure out a new mission and vision statement.
Have a part of the interview.
Yeah, have it be part of, maybe that's an interview question, is help us, how would you rewrite the mission and vision statement? But anyways, but I do, all kidding aside, I do think the language is a little, I dare say, hokey. And so revisiting it and polishing it would be good.
Oh, thank you. I'm just trying to start the conversation.
Good, that's great.
Mayor, I'd just like to make a statement. We don't even need a mission and vision to do what we do.
That's right.
I mean, it's all part of the process, I guess. But I never even think of it. We all try and do the best we can for Prescott, and that's what's important.
Absolutely. I think the strategic bullet points are much more important than massaging our vision and mission statement. A couple of things I wanted to mention. Having customer or resident surveys, I think we need to do a much better job of that. I've talked to a number of people about the redevelopment of the City Hall and mentioned the fact that we had a survey out there for people to contribute to, and very few people did. Yeah. But boy, we hear a lot of criticism about what we've decided on when we said, well, did you participate in that? Did you give us your input?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But, you should do this or that. So I think if we do a better job of publicizing and elevating the fact that those types of surveys are very important for us to be able to make a decision on where we want to go, I think that would be an improvement. I think the other thing is continuing to emphasize that our airport is a regional asset. Every surrounding community in our Yavapai County and even up in Coconino, when we did that leakage study, we knew that there's a lot of potential passengers that would be utilizing our airport. And I think making that much more of a recognized regional asset makes it much more likely that we're going to have a broad support for the growing capacity and the needed extensions of runways and other components of that airport is something that needs to be elevated as well. And lastly, I think as we now have terminated our PSPRS 443 tax, let's keep in mind that the investment team responsible for investing those funds has continued to significantly underperform their goal of a net return. To the extent that they underperformed ASRS by a total of 4 percentage points, when you talk about huge pension assets like we have, that's a tremendous number. And both of those pension systems underperformed what the Treasurer's Department has continued to show very effective investment policies. And one of the things I mentioned, if you really want to be able to get a great return, you can eliminate all those boards, invest in a nice X chair for a couple of $100 and put it right next to the treasurer's team that invests money and copy everything they do. Cut your overhead substantially and get you a much better return on investment. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But about 4 or 5 years ago, we investigated this IRS option that allows municipalities to set aside funds for providing pension investments that can supplement pension systems that underperform. So that hasn't been discussed by this council at all, and I think we might want to revisit that now, since we know that as long as the PSPRS Investment Board continues to not produce the returns that are necessary to make the program continue to be solvent and not go back into huge unfunded liability positions, we might want to take a look at that. So those are just a couple of comments that I had. Any other, do we have any public comment? Tanner?
Surprisingly not.
Chief, you got anything? Clear it out
You
the
get
room.
voted into this, Tanner, to represent the public?
Hey, Mayor, I move to approve the City of Prescott 2023 strategic plan.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Please vote.
Passes 6-0.
Okay, as we come to the end of this meeting, I did want to make a comment that, you know, I attended Edwin Perry's memorial service on Saturday. Ed passed away on November 17th. Really a substantial member of our community. A World War II B-17 veteran. And I know I was there for his 100th birthday a year ago last October. And we used to look over there. I think it was usually the fourth seat as you walked into the council chambers on the left. Mm-hmm. And Ed was there for every meeting for years. So here's an example of someone who really wanted to be a part of our city and monitor how we did things. In fact, when I went to the memorial service, Pastor Dan Hulbert, who did our invocation today, mentioned the fact that he continued to watch our meetings all the way up until maybe a week or two before he passed. Wow. So he could watch it on our Facebook page, and he did mention that he found that very valuable because he could fast forward through the boring parts. I said to the community, I said, I wish I could do that sometimes. But I think let's just take a brief moment of silence to recognize that. May you rest in peace. And I'll conclude this by, since we're talking about all the bills coming in through the legislature that are going to potentially impact our local control, here's a comment from Ronald Reagan back in 1990. We have found in our country that when people have the right to make decisions as close to home as possible, they usually make the right decisions.
Yep.
So local control means a lot.
Yep.
This meeting is adjourned.